boaty show. Living on the water is the only life we know. Yo, ho, ho, ho. It's time for the boaty show.
What's so funny? Nothing? You've been laughing hysterically for the last 7 minutes. We're wearing our hearing aids.
Yeah, we're our sort of assistive devices.
We've been joking for a few episodes now that we can hear each other speak so much more clearly when we're got the microphones and the earphones on.
Yeah, I know. It's hilarious and also super sad.
No, I don't know. Yeah, but it's I don't know. This is fun. So is not being able to really understand what you're saying.
All right, there's upsides to everything. It's a great point.
Because
it's a great point.
You say ridiculous things all the time. So when I hear you say something and I don't understand, my mind immediately makes the most ridiculous interpretation of what the sounds could possibly be.
And that's good news.
That's good news. It's entertaining. Did you just say?
That's true. You do that.
Did you just say Slurpee-licious?
Monkey home?
Monkey home? There was a monkey. Wasn't there a monkey?
No, I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of monkeys in your general history. But
Yeah.
we don't need to go there right now.
We don't?
I mean, we can. I'm just saying we don't need to.
I don't think we should.
Acknowledging the fact that when we say monkey, there's some backstory.
There's some backstory.
It'll come up eventually, naturally, on its own.
We don't need to force it. All right. Where are we? You're in one of your favorite spots.
Yeah, I'm on your porch.
No, but more importantly, you're
on a porch swing.
You're on a porch swing.
Yeah, I do love a porch swing.
You do.
This is a delightful porch swing. I'm having a great time.
That was made by Merle.
Oh, yeah, Merle.
Yeah, it's cedar.
Beautiful job.
Yeah, and then Brad and I hung it.
And it's on your porch in TI Park.
Yep.
At the river.
At the river.
Here we are, end of summer.
Well,
I mean, I don't want to piss anyone off. People seem a little touchy about this subject in my opinion.
They do? Tell me more.
Oh, my God. I mean, I live here year round. And I just feel people I understand. Nobody really wants to leave. Nobody wants summer to be over. People are a little touchy.
So you've brought this up with people and they've responded in a prickly way?
I think that my sensitivity to it is not what it should be. I think that realistically, I'm summer's over, which is fine.
You were about to say, which is great.
Which is great. You're right. Yeah, you did.
Maybe that's why it's touchy because you're yeah, summer's fucking over.
I know.
Woo!
But
fall. Let's do fall. And people are here who are I'm still trying to have a vacation.
I know. It's true. This happens a lot. So I want to make one distinction right now, which I think is important because I've been talking about this a bit. Mm-hmm. It's not that I want it to be over, and it's not that I want people to leave because it's hectic in the summer. And I'm trying to work and I'm trying to see all the people and have the visitors and do all the things. And I love doing all the things. I'm not complaining and I love it. Mm-hmm. But it's 2 months long. And then I don't mind seeing the mayhem end, but I do mind seeing the people leave. I want to be clear about that.
So for you to not set people off, they should be less mayhem-y.
No, it's not that. The mayhem is a general thing. It's just it's busy here.
Right.
But the specific people, I'm going to miss every single one of the human beings that I love that are leaving here. So I don't want to see the people go because I love the people.
Yeah.
But there's the way the seasonality is what it is.
Yeah.
It's crazy here, and then people will leave, and then it'll be nicer here in many ways. But I will miss every single person that leaves here. I guess that's it's an interesting combination of things.
Well, it'll be quieter. It'll still be just as warm.
Yeah, it'll be lovely, and people
Beautiful.
won't be here. And if I had to leave, I would feel the same exact way. So I get it.
Also, the people that don't live here or have to go and go slam a jamma back into school mode or whatever.
Yeah,
this is a short season place. It's July 4th to Labor Day, but really July 4th to August 15th. So it's 6 to 8 weeks long.
Agreed.
At the beginning of the summer, you're we have all the time in the world to hang out. Let's hang out. Hey, God, I can't wait to hang out. Let's hang out. And if you don't make specific plans, then all of a sudden it's August 15th and you're uh-oh. You maybe have some regrets over the people that you haven't gotten to spend quality time with. And you also don't have a lot of time left to stack a bunch of stuff up.
But plus, also, on top of that, there's also the fact that there is the whole point of summer is to not make the plans. Right? This is right. It's this is it, right?
Right.
So the whole point is not to be stressed out to be making plans all the time.
Right.
you need to let it be super chill too.
My summer of 2024 resolution was to make fewer plans but hang out with more people.
Yeah. So it's this is, again, great problems to have, but this it's a tricky one, and I would say that my whole life here in the Thousand Islands has been a little bit of a balance between the fun I want to have with people and the fun I want to have by myself in a beautiful place, and it's always that bit of a balance between those things.
Right.
And you never strike it right, and that's okay.
Yeah, you're always sort of like
wandering around,
fiddling with a dial, trying to get it tuned in right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's where we are right now.
Right.
August 20, blah, blah.
It's August 26th. This is going to come out on the
28th?
28th, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And this weekend is Labor Day weekend. Oh, let's do an announcement before we get rolling and I forget. This weekend is Labor Day weekend. The 31st, Saturday the 31st, Sarah Harmer is playing the fourth and final show of the music series that is happening in Thousand Island Park, being produced in large part by Jay Nash. He played the first show. We did our live show then. Sarah Harmer, I don't know a lot about her, but I do know that there are a lot of people in Canada who have bought tickets and are excited to come see her play because she's a big deal in Canada, which is like, I think I can see it from here.
What do you house?
know? Yeah. I can smell it. It smells
like maple syrup?
Smells like maple and Labatt's and hockey bags.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, Sarah Harmer's coming, so bring your hockey bag and get over here and see her.
No, you can leave your hockey bag behind because I can already smell it.
River Take Me Home.
rivertakemehome.org. Get a ticket before the show. You'll really support the people who are producing this, who put a lot of time and energy into it. And they're not supporting them financially. You're just like helping them feel good about the fact that they're making this happen. So rivertakemehome.org.com.
I think org.
Ticket sales go to support the community association in our little village, which like puts on kickball for kids and puts on lecture series and all kinds of other stuff like that. And the scene will be, I think it's going to be pretty good. Jay told me there might have been like 100 tickets sold like 2 weeks ago to Canadians. So I think it's a big venue. You're not going to have a bad seat, but I think it's going to be like a really, really high energy, fun crowd, which is always good. So
sounds awesome.
Go get a ticket. And if you're a musician and you would like us, this is something I didn't talk to you about, Stephanie.
Oh my God, I can't believe you're going to say something you haven't talked to me about. Shocking.
But I've been thinking. I think it's been fun to promote these shows and musicians, whether we know them or not. I think that if you are a listener and a musician and would like us to give you a little shout out and promote your show, maybe we'll do it as like the credits roll after the outro. So if you send an email to thebotishow@gmail.com and say, hey,
back up and running,
which is back up and running. Email is back up and running. Apparently I wasn't spamming. We'll see what we can do to plug you, promote you, whatever, wherever you are in the world, the country or the Thousand Islands.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? Is that cool?
I love that idea.
Yeah.
I mean, in general, we're supporting artists and artistry.
I've come to really appreciate what it takes to actually, and this is not meant to be a boast at all, but we make this thing and there are a bunch of people that listen to it every week and they love it. That's very gratifying. And also we put ourselves out there a bit as we do this. Mm-hmm. And musicians do the same thing from the stage, but
all the time
and live. And they, so I think I've developed a sense of of appreciation for what musicians do for us. And also the live shows that I've been to this summer, I've really enjoyed myself. I've been transported by the music. I don't really drink anymore. And so getting lost in something like that is super fun. Just being in a place with people, we're all sort of going through this summer, pretending not pretending, but not really wanting to think about what happened with the pandemic. But this is the first summer where we haven't had to have a bunch of tests in the house and all that bullshit.
Yeah. Just quickly, the last show we were at the Tabernacle was our dear, 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 dear friend Garrison Starr, who we've both loved for so long.
She's opening up for Jason Isbell at the Ryman in Nashville.
Nice.
Yeah, she's something else. She's damn.
But the reason that I rushed back from the Canadian Country Club where I was having dinner that night was
that sounds great.
Leave it. Both to see Garrison, but also because our friend, my son's friend Dory, was opening up for Garrison.
Yeah.
And so there's a young girl who's a senior in college, and she's she's going into her senior year in college, and she's been playing for our kids around the bonfire for years.
Yeah.
And I'd never heard her. I'd met her. We'd played tennis, oddly.
Yeah.
But I had never heard her sing. And so I went as early as I could to hear her, and it was absolutely magnificent.
She's sublime. She's got voice of an angel, and she played together with Emily Cardinaux, and they rocked it. It was great.
It was beautiful, yeah. So I just that was really nice for me because, again, there's just these are special times, and seeing people who are coming up.
All times are special times.
No. This is a particularly special time.
Dude,
everything else sucks.
We are dying. Every breath we take, every move we make.
Well, that is absolutely true. I will go there with you if you want.
We are dying.
Yeah.
So every time is a special time.
Neither this pain nor this life will last forever.
Mm-hmm. Man, hold your loved ones close, people. Hold them close and tight.
Listen,
because
I'll tell you,
we're dying.
I'll tell you. I mean, the end of summer is darker than the middle of winter. It's when summer. It's like things get weird in the end of summer. It gets weird.
No, it's not as weird as talking to you in the middle of dark winter, February, March.
Well, you should have tried me a couple days ago. There's a special kind of dark that happens this time of year.
I don't know how I lucked out and I was in Canada.
You were in Canada.
I went up
Thank
to Canada.
God.
Yeah,
the land of liveliness and happiness.
They all think it's better down here, so grass is always greener on the other side of the border.
Okay.
So Missy took me for a surprise trip to Westport, Canada, which we'd been to by boat 3 times before, and we stayed at the Cove Inn and saw live music. We saw Garrett Mason, who's a Juno award-winning blues guitarist. He tore the top of my head off and shined a bright light of happiness and wonder into my brain. It was amazing. This guy was incredible. I don't know how you make sounds come out of a guitar the way he makes sounds come out of a guitar.
And it was exactly what you wanted to hear.
Yeah, it was exactly what I wanted to hear. Every note he played. And a lot of it was improvisational. It was all blues. A lot of it was improvisational. Some of it was songs. He was the most humble, down-to-earth guy. He's from Halifax, Nova Scotia. He's got a couple albums out from the early mid-2000s. They're both out of print. You can't buy them. You can stream his music. If you've ever got an opportunity to go see him live, Garrett Mason, my sense of it is he plays a lot out around in and around Halifax and those environs, so far eastern Canada, and wow, it was good. And there wasn't anything especially boaty up there, but it's
on the Rideau.
On the Rideau, yeah. So it's been a boaty place for us in the past. And then we drove up to Perth, saw 3 friggin' river otters run across the road and dive into a creek on the other side.
Yes.
Big shiny, those looked like they just ran from a farm where they were probably mauling some chickens or something.
Like bumpers on wheels.
Bumpers on wheels.
Don't they look bumpers a little bit? They're round and kind of I don't know.
Oh, like boat bumpers?
Yeah.
Man, you've been around boats too much. It's that looks like a boat. That looks like an outboard motor on.
Definitely true that
I don't know why I had to make that into something I was giving you a hard time about.
That's all right.
I should have just gone with it. Yeah, bumpers on wheels. Yeah, totally. Bumpers on legs. Legs, wheels? Okay.
Legs. I
wheels.
meant legs.
No, wheels.
Yeah.
But and then we went up to Perth, which is at the end of the Tay Canal, which is a branch off of the Rideau Canal. Dude, Perth is friggin' gorgeous and boaty. And I might actually, the two of us might do a whole episode just reading the historical markers and stuff of all this crazy boaty stuff that's happened in Perth. And they were trying to get the canal widened so that they could get shipping up there.
I bet they
It's in the middle of the Canadian countryside. Yeah, so
dare to dream.
That was cool. And but before we left, Walker and I did our first scuba dive dive certification, and we went and dove on the kind of the big news of the summer, which was this 28-foot Sea Ray that hit a rock and sank.
Chaparral.
Chaparral, thank you. Mm-hmm. Not too far away from us. It was a twin inboard outboard, ripped the port lower unit off and flooded, went down right away, and it sat bobbing in the river for 4 days. I think we mentioned it a little bit on the scavenger hunt show.
Dark.
Yeah, and it was right in the middle of a major throughway that people use at night and daytime too, but often at night. And it was just below the surface with teeny little bits of it just poking out because there was some mix up with the insurance company and God knows what. But anyway, when we filled our air tanks at the dive shop, the gentleman who runs the dive shop said, there's still some stuff down there. And so we went.
Did he say it like that?
Yeah, it was all like. It was all.
Do it again.
There's still some stuff down there.
Okay. All right.
He didn't say it like that. But I heard it like that.
Yeah, I guess you did.
So we went and we dove and we came up with a Magma marine grill, stainless steel marine grill, and a pair of binoculars and a bimini top and like bows and canvas, and it was awesome. And both Walker and I are over the moon about getting some solid salvage on our first post-certification dive.
Yeah, good job, you guys. I'm
Hey,
really
thanks.
proud of you. And
Thanks.
you know, we've already established that I'm jealous, and I also want to dive. But also, I'm just glad you're doing it. You're exploring a whole other side of the river.
Thank you. It was cool. It was really cool to that whole wreck was it was a whole lot of news around here because the boat.
It was for good reason.
Yeah.
It was sketchy. It was scary. In some ways, we were all like, I'm glad it's there because our kids are maybe getting freaked out and realizing how scary.
Oh yeah,
can be.
when you're bitching at me about going around the shoals, maybe I should listen to you instead of get all
it's
butthurt.
just it is for everybody, not just our kids. For everybody, it was a real you couldn't drive by that thing without being you got the shivers. You know, you got the
Right.
shivers. Zzz.
It was cool that boat was there, and it was sketchy. It was horrible, all things, and also that we were sort of part of cleaning it up. There was chunks of fiberglass on the bottom.
Did you bring up the propane container that was down there? Maybe that was still attached to the boat when they took it.
I talked to the dive shop guys who were involved in the salvage, and they unhooked it and brought it because it was they didn't want that floating down the river. There were some scraps of fiberglass that had been ground off this boat in the divot in the rocks and shells and stuff, zebra mussel shells and stuff. I picked those up because I think that's you don't want that in the river.
You're making the world a better place.
Yeah, I don't want goby. I don't want that to enter the microplastic situation.
Great job.
Microplastic situation's not a bad episode name.
Yep. All right. Now listen, it's been a busy week,
Yeah.
and we can't do this as much as we'd love to. We can't do this all night.
No, we got to get down to it because Walker and I are going to go catch some.
Walleye fishing.
We're going to go walleye fishing after dark.
What?
Just sounds like something that would be on public access cable.
Walleye fishing after dark.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. The words fishing and after dark should not be used together for the most part.
Yeah.
But you guys went on a dive today and you saw a bunch of walleye.
We did.
From behind your masks, and now you're going to go catch them on the end of your lines.
Yeah. Walker and I, we went to the Natural Features dive site, which Stephanie created back in the olden days.
I did with a lot of help from some great people. A guy named Ken was really involved. He was amazing. He was a fisherman and he was into it. And Beck Hohen was a big part of it. Rob was part of it. We were putting together a Natural Features dive site, which was it was used by you today exactly how it was supposed to be used, which is something to hook onto and just go check out a really cool part of the river.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
off of Clayton. And
it's amazing. So it's this bunch of spikes sticking up out of the depths. There are standalone spikes coming up from 90, 100, 120 feet to, poking up above the river, the surface of the river. There's a couple of long shoals, and we circled one of the spikes that connects to a long shoal, and we swam up the the southwest side of it, and there was some grass and not much else, a bunch of goby.
Say southwest.
Southwest.
That's better. Thank you.
Northeast.
Thank you. Go ahead. Carry on.
Yes, and then we turned and swam. We turned the corner to head in a northeasterly direction and went with the current because the river flows from the southwest to the northeast.
This is paying off so much more than I thought it would.
Yeah.
Keep it up.
And we're cruising down the back of this shoal where there was a much steeper drop off, and there were all the walleye in the river. Maybe we're just right there, and they didn't know what to make of us, so they were swimming up to us and looking at us in the face and then swimming away, and then one of them turned around and came back and looked at us again. It was wild.
So I want to just say at this moment, I don't know how comfortable Walker is with this whole conversation, but I started working at Save the River and I have no fishing background whatsoever. So when people would come in and talk about fish, I'd be like, where'd you find the fish? And they would just all sort of comfortably gaze at me that's not the right question. You don't ask that question. It was a little gauche. Like, you just don't tell people where the fish are.
Oh, here we are telling everybody where all the walleye are.
I know. And it's funny because for me, it didn't occur to me that you shouldn't. It's a conversational thing.
Dude, it's hard enough to get your ass out there and try and like.
I couldn't agree more.
Dip your lure in the water.
This is more about my cluelessness than it is about anything.
It is about whether or not I'm
like, fishing guys would come in and be like, I caught a muskie, I want to get my print, and I'd be like, where'd you catch it? And they were like, well, easy there, missy.
There's trade secrets.
Easy. They just all said 40-acre shoals because that was like the easy answer.
Which
and now I
isn't
do
even a
that
place.
in healthcare because people are like, this happened, and I'm like, who did it happen to? And everyone looks at me like, Jesus, who brought the JV crew?
Well, that's like a HIPAA violation, so it's different than a muskie.
I'm an environmentalist. I didn't know. It's the same thing. I'm all like, who did it happen to? And everyone's just like shaking their head silently, like looking at me like,
nope.
Nope.
We don't tell people where the muskie are from.
Okay,
and we don't talk
about what things shit I don't know.
It's another shit Steph don't know. That might be an episode name.
Yeah, or 7 episodes.
It's a shit Steph don't know. A compendium.
I bet
a series.
I bet there's more.
A mini series. It's a mini series.
Let me go find a new job
Oh,
and find out how much.
This is the
no,
dumb.
don't give me the dumb broad thing.
This is the dumb broad thing.
It's true for all of us. There's always more stuff we don't know.
Yeah, that's why.
And that's okay. It's fine.
Did somebody say it wasn't?
Yeah, you were implying that somehow I should be like shouldn't. I don't know.
Well, I don't know that you should celebrate the fact that you don't know shit. That's
what I do.
I guess you celebrate everything, including the shit you don't know.
That's what I do. Ask Max Kenner.
Max Kenner. No, I don't know. Oh, God. I think I broke my ribs.
Oh, shit, I know.
I think I broke my ribs in Canada, so I can't reach.
Oh,
I gotta
no.
reach
This is
down,
actually hard.
Oh,
This is hard for me to listen to right now. Oh, God, that's better. Whew.
It's the boat of the week, stable or sleek. Check out that vessel, baby, isn't she sweet? It's the boat of the week, the boat of the week. Oh, how I love me, the boat of the week. La 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 la. Hey, let's check out the boat of the week.
That's right, everybody. We have email again. So we have boats of the week again.
Woo! Let's go. Also, it's about to be winter.
So
now we're establishing like nostalgic boat of the week.
It's gonna be 10 months of looking at boats online and talking about them.
There was 1 week where we're like, we're tired of boats, and then we went right back to it.
Yeah. All right, you, my friend, need to present the boat of the week as submitted by Gabe.
This is from Captain David.
No.
I got it.
Captain David didn't actually submit a boat of the week. Captain David submitted a bunch of very helpful and interesting articles, which I'm actually thinking about how we could have some bonus episodes where we're talking about some of these topics, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what these topics are, but I believe you. And
first fiberglass boat, awesome lineman, some cool guy that cruised through the river from Captain David. And he also sent us a picture that it's like a scavenger hunt for Captain David. He sent a picture of a sticker from a marina.
Amazing.
And he said, "Where I'm hiding for now." So he's like, he wants to have us to have a scavenger hunt. Captain David.
Well, we have not had enough scavenger hunts. We've only had one scavenger hunt this whole summer, so we obviously need another one.
We'll go another one. It's just like one clue where Captain David is.
Thank God.
So keep sending emails with like little breadcrumbs for us to follow.
All right, I found this is the boat of the week.
You should present this.
Gabe Nathan. He writes, another tumble home smoke show. There's a video I haven't watched, but I can see the boat. And it's hot, and Jeff's going to put it on the social and on the website. Maybe. Or I will. I'll do it. Watch me. Anyway, I just would like to read the copy. Should I explain the boat first?
Yes.
Oh, seems hard. It's white. It's wood. There's varnished top deck-ishness. Maybe. Are those portholes on the side? No. Ridiculous.
You're doing great.
It's curvy. It's like Riva-ish.
Oh, yes.
Definitely a lot of tumble home. And there's got a crazy fin situation on the side. Like it's like a side fin, right? See it?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I don't know what to say about that except I don't know.
What's sticking out its butt?
Swim ladder?
I don't
Mast?
know.
Don't know.
It's got
Great
something
question.
sticking out of its transom.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Like it's folded out.
Here's what it says. And these aren't Gabe's words. This is what it says along with the picture. Combines classic style and glamour with cutting-edge technology, power, and contemporary convenience. A finely balanced blend of old and new where form and function are equal importance, blah, blah, blah.
That's lame-ass copy,
Boring.
Mr. Exumas.
But let's hear
That's
what
like,
Gabe
that's
has
like
to
the
say.
label on a bottle of shitty wine.
Okay. Late in the summer. But here's what Gabe has to say.
Gabe's copy is
This
good.
really makes me happy. Also, it's so good. In a description, I learned that Tumble Home's original function was on a warship. It made boarding her harder because of the curve and slope, and potential boarders would tumble off the sides. Parentheses, and presumably home? Question mark. Fun fact. I mean, amazing.
Home to Davy Jones's locker. Like some shit like that.
I mean, I
Yeah.
just think this is amazing.
We thought Tumble Home was just like,
I don't know what we thought it was. We just thought it was
the cleavage of boats. Damn it. I'd been so long since I'd done that. And I thought I shouldn't say it, but then I did.
But I mean, Tumble Home just sounded so disconnected to me from anything. But now it got naughty in a hurry when Gabe was like
Boarding made what? Well, Gabe was
boarding
like, what?
her harder. Because,
No, you'd made it naughty.
well, I mean, it's not like it didn't occur to Gabe. He can call back and tell me if I'm the one that made it weird. It's not even weird. It's great. I love it. It's a great description, and it makes sense.
It does.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this jives with a story that we heard from Brian Danforth, which
Forgot
is
that
his,
story.
which
Tell
is
us again.
which is his to tell. But he went for a cruise on a classic boat with a whole bunch of Tumble Home, and his friend slipped off the boat and ate it because of the Tumble Home. He like stepped at the edge he stepped on the deck, but his foot was like sort of over the edge onto the Tumble Home part, and just enough that his foot slipped and he went down hard. And I don't know if he went into the river or not, but Brian needs to tell this story on air. Brian, if you're listening, we need to get back in touch. Are you going to come back to the river?
He's coming back next weekend.
Oh,
Not
Labor
this
Day
matters.
weekend. We're going to
The
see
one
everybody.
after.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right, we got to hurry up because the mosquitoes are trying to eat me alive right now.
All right.
Let's go.
My mom sent an Admiral's Choice.
Ooh, that sounds good.
It's a double-decker pontoon boat with twin Suzukis on the back, a water slide off the port side from the upper deck, a driving station up top, and a driving station down low. I think it's fantastic.
Can you tell me how I find it?
It's in the email. It says
I know, but what is it called?
Admiral's Choice.
I don't have it. Oh, I got it. I got it.
Another
Sorry.
second submission from Gabe. It floats, you stay dry, you get loaded and unloaded upon arrival. No further details, but it looks like Pittsburgh has fun on lock. And these are 2 tiki bar boats out in like the Three Rivers intersection in Pittsburgh, cruising around.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I
They're
love
like,
it so much.
They're like modular. They look like they've been joined for the cruise.
Yeah. Also, Gabe gets points for sending 2 very different ends of the
Yes.
spectrum, like Tiki and also Tumble Home.
Right. Tiki Tumble Home.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always looking for an episode name.
I know you are.
Okay. And then there was a submission from Janelle
Oh, yeah.
Century. All right. I'll describe it. It is probably about 24 feet, sweet 70s design with a hardtop, but that hardtop slides back.
Yeah, exactly. It's a sliding hardtop, which I really appreciate because the problem with the hardtop is sometimes you don't want it, right? You want to stand up and see where you are at night.
Yeah.
And also, like, if it's hot out, you don't want it there. So I love the sliding hardtop.
In her presentation of this, her argument is this is a 3-season pleasure boat. And this is definitely it's like a late 50s, early 60s sort of Cadillac, Coupe de Ville kind of looking boat. Big bench seat across the front, big bench seat in the back, and all those kinds of like sweet 50s details. It doesn't have fins, which I actually like. I'm not a big fan of the fins on boat thing.
Right, it's a lot.
And I get it. Like they're cool and it floats some people's boat, but not mine.
Coin a phrase.
Right? But the sliding hardtop, so you could
The sliding hardtop has a serious functionality, which I am fully behind it.
And her argument is, hey, you could take this thing out in November and you'd be fine. And then you can take this thing out in July and you slide the hardtop back and you're good.
Love it.
All right.
What?
That's it. Who's going to win? Who's going to win the coveted sticker?
I can't decide.
The Tumble Home for Days boat. It's trying too hard.
Yeah, I mean, I really like the description. but I did the boat.
You
I
like
did-
Gabe's description?
Yeah, exactly.
Of
I
what
like
tumble hung
Gabe's
is.
description. I'm really happy that's a part of our collective knowledge at this point.
Yep.
But the boat itself,
As proven
I
by
did-
empirical experience of Brian Danforth's
Yes,
buddy who
exactly.
like ate it off the side of a boat because of the tumble hung.
We know it's true.
Yep.
Yes. Not only does it make sense, we know it's true. But the boat doesn't need to win for me.
No.
Nope, doesn't
Nope.
need to. Okay, next.
Tiki bar boats.
Tiki bar boats, amazing. We love them. I feel like they've had a place. They've had a very strong presence in the show. You and I both love them. But,
They made it into the live show.
but
Yeah.
I also feel like the point stands that they're not super boaty
They meet but they meet your criteria of getting people out on the water.
and not getting wet.
Yeah.
It's a great point.
Okay.
There's drinks involved. I mean, it's a strong contender.
But oh god, that Century is really pretty.
Yeah, there's just no two ways about it. It's
And-
so hot.
And innovative. And I'm looking for, how everything that once was will be cool again. I think sliding hardtops they are kind of already are. There's like a whole lot of express cruisers that people have put roofs on. And then they but I want the roof to slide back or fold back so that I can, yeah. So
and it's just so styly, such a styly, lovely, delicious boat in so many ways.
yeah.
I'm all about it. I'm a big fan. And also, hats off, Janelle. Well found.
Well found.
Also, just anything that's a Century, you just win.
You hear that, ladies and gentlemen? You got a sticker in the mail and just submit a Century. All right. Ladies and
right.
gentlemen, that Century
There it is.
your boat of the week. This is going to be maybe our longest episode ever because have a happy surprise. I went
Yeah, you
and
do.
spent like 4 hours with Scott Smith, who is you're just going to have to listen to the episode. He knows more about outboard motors than I could imagine any person knowing. He was an amateur boat racer, Canadian national stock outboard boat racing champion, and he's got like an incredible shop that blew my mind. And I got lost in conversation with him for forever. And so we'll play that interview, and you're going to get 2 shows for the price of one. 2 shows, a boaty show within a show.
I love it. Amazing.
So that's coming up next.
You're
And
welcome, everybody.
we're gonna everybody say goodbye to Steph because she's not gonna say anything on the other end of this interview. So you want to say stay floaty, Stephanie?
Yeah, stay floaty, everyone.
All right, we're out. Enjoy listening to me talk to Scott Smith.
We're back.
All right, record is recording.
Yo ho ho, it's time for the Boaty Show. Living on the water is the only life we know. Yo ho ho ho, it's time for the Boaty Show.
I'm here with Scott Smith, an old friend and wizard in the sort of sense of knows it, lives it, practices it around boating, boat racing, boat restoration, motor restoration, and tuning, and all of those kinds of things. And I'd always heard about Scott as like, oh, Scott Smith, like he can, he knows everything about 2-strokes and your old outboards and that kind of thing. But I didn't really put it together until I saw today in the last hour and a half about 150 2-stroke outboards, and then just learned that really the only 4-stroke that Scott owns is the Buick Block Universal 6 in this really beautiful double cockpit runabout that we're currently leaning against, and all of the sound equipment is set up on the transom of.
Well, I appreciate the pluses there. I do got to say, when you were doing the intro, I typically listen to the show when I'm driving along in my van, and I sing along with the intro, so it was very hard to keep my mouth shut during that.
Jay Nash made some earworms, didn't he?
He does. He has a knack.
He's really something else. And you've known Jay for a long time, right?
I've known him since he was a teenager playing at Skiffs in Alex Bay back in the day.
Yeah, cool. Where are we right now?
We are in our family shop here in Fisher's Landing, where I do most of my tinkering. I guess I'm less of a restorer or rebuilder. I like to tinker.
Yeah. Well, you also like to use. So
Yes.
I very much appreciate that. You want it to work so you can use it.
I collect things to some degree, but if I don't have a use for it, I am more than happy to send it along the way. I've probably given away a couple dozen motors over the last 5 years, and I'm like, you know what? I'm not doing anything with that. Oh, so-and-so's kid has a knack for taking apart the clock in the bedroom. Well, maybe he wants to mess with an outboard motor kind of thing.
Yeah. That's a great thing. I think and you walked us through the boats collection in the other two shops that we're gonna talk a little bit about, but then do a video tour of. And it's clear that there are very few preservation pieces in there. There are some because there's things that are so, of such historical importance that they need to just be preserved. But then there are a lot that are like, oh, that gets used or could get used. I want to use, and it's more like you're looking for a reason to use the 1957 Mercury than you are like trying to like keep it perfect.
Exactly. And I have a few motors that I call them survivors. They're the ones that maybe somebody used until 1958, and then it sat in Grandpa's shed and didn't get touched for 40 years.
Yeah, and I'm trying, like, I have an instinct to keep something because of what it was. I'm trying hard not to do that too much and keep something because of what it is and can still be in terms of how I'm going to use it. And so let's segue back on that point. Let's segue back to the boat that we're recording on. I'm leaning against it. It's I said a double cockpit mahogany runabout, and you shared with me that it was built by Phelps and Cornell.
Yes, two gentlemen back in the 1930s, one of which had access to what is now Cornell Boat Works in Henderson Harbor. So it's a relatively local boat, and they would build the shell of the boat in Endicott, New York, and then transport it to Henderson during the summer months to fit it out with engine and hardware and all that sort of thing.
And so what year was this built?
1936.
And what year did your family buy it?
1946. So it was just a used boat back then. My grandfather saved all the money that my dad and aunt and uncle made with their Victory Garden during the war. And after the war said, if you guys find a boat, we can get a boat, because they had a cottage here in Fish's Landing that they would come to for the summers, and they needed a boat. So
yeah, you need a boat when you're on the Thousand Islands. So the Victory Garden was grow your own food so that the food supply from the United States could be dedicated to the war effort, right?
Correct. And they grew vegetables, they raised chickens and collected the eggs and all that sort of thing.
Right. And so, and then sold them at a market and where?
Yeah, and just had a little stand by the side of the road in Montrose, Pennsylvania, where they lived, and that was how they saved. And my grandfather, he was an eye doctor, so it wasn't like they didn't need the money. It was just something to keep the kids busy during the war.
Got it. And with a goal of having a boat so that they get out in the river.
Didn't know it at the time until afterwards. And my grandfather said, I saved all that money you kids earned, and we can go get a boat.
That's awesome. And this boat's pretty sweet. Like, as Scott said, you see it now and you're like, oh, antique, classic. And so I'll say my impression of these mahogany runabouts is that they've always been special, and they've always been classic, and they've always been antique. But when you hear about somebody buying a used boat in 1946, that isn't a whole lot different than, it's 2024 right now, buying a used Cobalt or Chaparral from 2014 and just like, okay, I was going to get this thing so we can get out in the water.
This boat, when my grandfather bought it, was newer to them than your Cobalt was to you.
Yeah, that Cobalt is something. It's an 81, so it's 43 years old right now. So yeah, this was not an antique or a classic, and that's something I like. I think about a lot. What is antique and what is classic is like a moving window through time. My theory is that it's whatever we were really excited about when we were about 14.
Metal flake.
Is this confirming my theory? Is this confirming so when you were 14, you were born in 71?
69.
69, okay. So when you were 14, it was 72. No, Jesus, 82.
82, 83, and Hydrostreams were all the rage on the river, so that's why I have one.
You do. You have a boat with probably like 20 to 30 pounds of metal flake in the gel coat. Like, it is so sparkly. It is so sparkly. So, and we'll go see that in a little bit. But you grew up riding around in this Phelps and Cornell double cockpit runabout. You said earlier, like, you quote unquote inherited, but it's more like you sort of took over the stewardship of it. And
I'm the caretaker.
The caretaker, right. And Jay Nash talked a lot about that when he talked about the Bluffer, which is his Hutchins.
Yep. We actually, Jay and I have talked about our wooden boat family boats a great deal over the years, just kind of what they mean to us, and how we've kind of been anointed as, okay, it's our turn. Yeah.
And this thing is 99% original wood, which is not typical of a wooden boat. Like, typically just you've got to swap out planks, ribs, all of it. And so over time, like, the whole thing could be the same shape, but like maybe only the steering wheel is original, which makes them like kind of these organic living beings I think of. So, but this has a new engine cover. The planks in the new engine cover are new, but
2 planks in the engine cover were replaced in the 90s.
just those 2?
Just 2. Yep.
Okay. And Scott's looking around right now because
We tucked them somewhere.
your dad saved them. Or was your grandfather? All right. So I'm looking at an engine plank.
That's the original.
Got it. It's about a 1/2 inch mahogany.
I think you can see the Dutchman that was in there that wasn't well done,
Yeah.
but it patched the hole. But he saved the whole plank. So when I had a repair to do on the boat in the present day, I had original wood to use to make the repair with. So it went back into the boat.
That's pretty sweet. So if you have a boat, a wooden boat, save your planks for the next person. That's really neat. And a Dutchman I learned is it's effectively like a chunk of wood you cut out that needs to go, and then you swap in and carefully fit, and then sand a new chunk in to replace it. So it's almost like putting a biscuit in, or if you think of inlay or veneer, like inlay in a veneer, it's not just the surface, but it's the whole wood.
And inlay is more of a decorative. This was just a repair.
Right. A Dutchman is a repair. The Universal Buick block. Universal is the Marinizer
Yep.
of the Buick block in here.
Just like Mercruiser takes Chevy blocks, GM blocks, and
Yeah.
puts their name on it and calls it a Mercruiser.
Okay. This is seized right now because it sat for so long.
In a damp gravel barn with
Yeah.
condensation and whatnot, and 20 years of disuse.
Right. Do you know, or do you think that it was appropriately winterized, but even after 20 years,
It
still
may
seized?
not have been. The last year it was in the water, I think it was 2001. My father's health, he was still using it at the time, but his health took a nosedive, and it just kind of got pulled out and put away without, I don't think we did our due diligence.
Yeah. When life happens, sometimes
It does.
That stuff happens. Yeah. And it's a cool little like tight package of a 6-cylinder V6. I'm rooting for you to rebuild it.
Well, and the nice thing is they used them in a lot of different vehicles back in the day. So even if this is not rebuildable, there's a lot of the short blocks, and you can get a car engine, throw the marine stuff on it, and it'll work fine in a boat.
Okay.
So they actually used them in a lot of postal Jeeps back in the late 60s, early 70s. So
Huh. And they're not in like, are those 6-cylinders, are they in demand, you think, for like hot rodders or anything?
honestly, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. In the like pop culture hot rod stuff that I follow, I don't hear a lot about 6-cylinders. Sometimes people get excited about Toyota 6-cylinders that they want to swap in because they can generate a lot of power under boost, but this is not necessarily that. The winterization that you are an enthusiast for or a proponent of, what are the steps?
Well, for an inboard engine like this, just make sure you've drained all of the manifolds, and either where there's a petcock or anything you can loosen up, or a plug to pull out.
To get the cooling water out that
Get the
circulates
water
through the
out.
block, right?
Make sure the last time you run fuel with stabilizer in it, your Stabil or whatever your brand of choice is.
Whatever your snake oil of choice is.
Yep.
Is Stabil your snake
That's
oil of
typically
choice?
what I get. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I'm not getting paid for their endorsement.
Neither are we, so we'll just drop them.
But yeah, and make sure your fuel is good. Drain what you can, oil what you can. Good time to grease it. I mean, if the prop is dinged up, pull it off, have it rebuilt over the winter, and just typical stuff like that. Just so when you go in the spring, you put the plugs back in, turn the key, and away you go.
Yeah. And having just recommissioned a boat that was obsessively maintained and winterized, I think it was mostly just winterized.
Mm-hmm.
I can vouch for it. It's a freshwater cooled motor, that Mercruiser 485, but all of that stuff had been done to it, and because of that, it looked brand new. And
The aluminum block.
we will get there. Can't wait.
What is it? The 470 and the 485 were the two they did back then.
Yes.
They were all built in-house at Mercury.
They're first engineered and cast from the ground up.
Yep. No more GM attachment,
Yep. Okay.
or Ford at that.
We're going to hold off because I want to do one segue. That's how you went. And you spray oil into the carburetor of the four.
A two-stroke, because a carburetor, it only goes into the cylinder in a 4-stroke. It does not go into the engine internally.
Okay.
All you'd be doing, if you sprayed oil into the carburetor in a 4-stroke, all you'd be doing is putting oil in the top of the piston, and you're not really lubricating much.
So how do you oil the cylinder and piston in a 4-stroke? Do you pull
You pull the plugs and maybe squirt some oil in.
there's a little malpractice out there with, you can do that, or you can fog the 4-stroke by spraying oil into the carb.
I guess a lot depends on the engine too. I mean, if you put oil in the cylinder directly, gravity will work its way down. On an outboard where the pistons are horizontal, might not do so much.
Okay. Got it.
Don't
All right.
take that. My 4-stroke experience is limited. So
Again,
don't take that as gospel.
150 engines. One of them is a 4-stroke, and it's currently seized. Not due at all to any neglect or negligence, due to life, and also just sitting. Like this thing could have been winterized perfectly, and it's still in a damp environment.
Yeah.
The oil's going to migrate. Huh. So 4-stroke versus 2-stroke. I've butchered and barely came back from my butchery of the difference between the two, mostly by looking at animated GIFs. Online, I'm like, okay, I think I get it.
Well, it starts with the definition of the stroke is one down or up movement of the piston.
Yep.
So in a 2-stroke, for every power stroke, there's one down, one up of the piston. And on the up is the compression stroke, where the fuel that is in the cylinder is compressed. The spark plug fires, drives the piston back down. That's the power stroke.
Yep.
And that's what turns the crankshaft, which turns your drive shaft, propeller on down the line of the powertrain.
Right. Okay.
So in a 4-stroke, you have valves that are introduced into the mix for your induction and excretion of the exhaust once the combustion is done.
Yep.
The piston comes down, sucks in fuel by creating a vacuum. Piston comes back up, compresses that fuel. The fuel is ignited at the top of that compression stroke. Now it's being driven down again by the expansion of the gases, comes back up and pushes the exhaust out. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
And then it begins.
And there's an inlet valve that lets the fuel and air in,
Mm-hmm.
and an outlet valve that lets that exhaust out.
Correct.
Okay.
In a 2-stroke, it typically comes in one side of the piston as the intake. That is essentially, as the fuel is coming in one side of the piston, it's pushing the exhaust out the other side.
What actually drives the? Is the piston still creating a vacuum?
Yes. And in a 2-stroke, typical 2-stroke outboard, you have valves, what they're called reed valves, and they're in the crankcase of the engine by the carburetor. And as the piston comes up, it creates a vacuum in the crankcase, sucks fuel into the crankcase through the carburetor.
Whoa.
So that fuel is now in the crankcase. As the piston comes down, it's creating a pressure inside the crankcase. As the ports in the cylinder open, that pressure is now released into the ports. So the fuel is now going into the ports, which are in the exit into the cylinder itself.
So exiting the crankcase into the cylinder.
Yep. And in the process, pushing the exhaust out, which is what they call scavenging. Some of the scavenging the exhaust out of the engine. Some of the new fresh fuel is also going out with the exhaust, which is part of the reason why 2-strokes are dirty.
Quote, right.
You can leave a little oil slick behind you if you're not careful.
Fuel, yeah. All right, that is a beautiful description of what happens, because in a very lay sense, yeah, the fuel air ends up in the crankcase, which is where the crank and the pistons attached to the crank and all this stuff. It's sort of like this internal mystery of the power head, but it's actually a pump.
Mm-hmm. It's an air compressor basically.
And the cylinders open at the bottom end in the crankcase, mm-hmm. so that the piston coming down is pumping is creating pressure in the crankcase. So it's
creating pressure and creating vacuum depending on which direction it's going.
Yeah, pressure and vacuum. That's brilliant. That's really simple.
It's simple. There's
really simple.
The crankshaft and the pistons are the only moving parts. There's no drivetrain. There's no valve train. That's sucking up energy out of that system.
There's no camshaft. So a camshaft in a 4-stroke is what, it's like
it operates the valves.
It's like the internals of a clock.
Yeah.
That it turns, and then because of the shape of it makes different stuff happen. Like operating the valves, like in a pushrod V8, the pushrods ride on the camshaft, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
you can literally see them. I've had the manifold off the engine here. You can see down inside the engine and see the camshafts.
Okay. So all that complexity is gone, mm-hmm. and you just have the rotating assembly is the crankshaft.
Connecting rods and piston are all the moving parts.
I never thought of this as, of course, fuel and air have to go in, explode to generate power, and exhaust has to go out. So in every sense, an internal combustion engine is a form of a pump, but a 2-stroke is a really simple and elegant form of pump.
It's a simple and it's simple, lightweight, and because it's creating power on every rotation of the crankshaft, it's also very powerful. So that's why typically with an outboard, they say that the 2-stroke gives you much better acceleration. A 4-stroke can kind of be a little logy off the line. And
Yeah.
you hammer it, it takes a while to get there. 2-stroke, it's power right away. Not quite electric power level, but it's a lot more torquey. Torque is where it really comes into play.
Got it.
And because you have fewer moving parts, you can also rev them high. And there are guys who, in racing, in the modified division and pro division, they're spinning them on nearly 20,000 RPM.
So, and every one of those revolutions is a power generating revolution instead of at 20,000 RPMs theoretically for a 4-stroke.
You got a lot of moving parts.
And only 10,000 of those 20,000 revolutions are actually generating power. Got it. I'm a big fan of the Evinrude E-Tech, and as we've discussed on the show, I'm butthurt that Bombardier stopped making them because of that. Like the power to weight ratio, the torque, the fact that I can get I generally have like heavier boats. I can get them up and going with less drama, and the engine doesn't have to work as hard to get them up and going. Is a big deal for how I boat. Like I don't like to go super fast. I'm not about high end, but I want to get going and go to that like 25, 30 that I enjoy boating at right away. So the move from 2-stroke to 4-stroke motors what was that primarily driven by?
The EPA, just because 2-strokes they smoke, they leave oil slicks, and they don't look good in that sense.
Yeah. Well, that's something that I've talked with our friend Rob, our mutual friend Rob, about. He made a comment once about our Penyan, and he may not know this, but he may not remember this, but he made a comment once about our Penyan 24-foot Penyan Avenger. It's got a OMC 350 V8, like nothing special. And he's like, oh, it's just like dumping gas in the river. And he's all about electrification, electric boats.
Well, he has a Tesla.
He does have a Tesla, which he walks a walk, because before there was a supercharger network that ran country, like across the entire country, he was road tripping from California to the East Coast with his family and using 120 outlets to charge in parking lots and figuring it out.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So I give him nothing but credit for this, and he and I will go back and forth. But I think about sort of like my net carbon and my net pollution, right? So like the amount of gas I burn in my boats, whether I burn it or it ends up being exhausted as part of my 2-stroke inefficiency, is like, it's just not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of my life, right?
Well, if I were to go out and buy a brand new 4-stroke, how much energy went into creating those castings and all that? And for literally, the amount I actually use in our short season up here.
Yeah. 6 weeks, 8 weeks, maybe.
How much gas do I really burn?
Yeah.
And is dropping 5 figures on a new motor worth it to save $100 a year in gas?
Yep. Right. I think there's like a way to consider this all around, and I'm all about water quality and air quality. I am an adamant environmentalist. At the same time, like I like to think about that. Like I have some older vehicles that I like to keep in service because then I don't need a new one.
Yeah. Well, and I'm not to say that if I stumbled across a 10-year-old E-Tech that had a bum piston, I wouldn't pick it up cheap and rebuild it myself. But I'm not going to go down and drop $10,000 on a newer engine
or more. Jesus.
Just because I'm capable of rebuilding the engine myself.
Yeah.
And it lets me know, okay, this is how it all goes together. And I'm more, if something happens down the line, it's like, oh, that's because of X.
And you're that makes it a much more engaging experience for you boating, right?
Yeah.
Just like getting in and turn the key for a lot of people is all they want. And God bless them. I'm really happy that there are lots of options for people to get out on the water, even more now than there used to be, where like getting in, turn the key, motor starts, you go, where that's the norm. Because like boat motors used to be a lot more fiddly. Part of the reason why they're so much more expensive now is
what I had growing up.
Yeah.
And that's out of necessity. I learned how to fix my own stuff because I wasn't say, Dad, the engine doesn't work again, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. And so I'll segue back using that to your dad added a nice, actually it sounds like the biggest 4-stroke motor that he could to this Phelps and Cornell. He wanted to add more power. Adding power is a genetic trait in your family.
Could be.
There's something, I don't know what, but your grandfather, was he the eye doctor?
He actually was barely a boater. Our river connection was through my grandmother. He married into it.
Okay.
My grandmother was a Riggs from Watertown. There's actually a Riggs Avenue. My great-grandfather was Charlie Riggs, who was a developer in Watertown, and that's where my grandmother and her family came from, and she married my grandfather, who was not a boater.
He was from Pennsylvania. You said Montrose earlier? Got it.
Yep, he was an eye doctor, as was his father before him. The family cottage is next door here in Fisher's Landing, where my they call it Cousins Bay because we're related to about half the people in the bay here. But yeah, my grandfather was not a boater. He tried. He was game. He tried, but he was not a boater.
So in the sort of, this happens all over the world where there's a union.
Mm-hmm.
And unless they met on the water in the boat, typically one half of that union is more boaty than the other half. And sometimes it's viewed as a test. Because like was your grandmother going to stop boating for your grandfather?
No, and that's why they have a cottage that's been in their family for a couple of generations now too.
Right. But he was game, so he passed the test. He got in it, and as we just spoke,
he tried. He tried.
And he bought a boat with the Victory Garden savings.
He did. He was not anti-boating. He enjoyed it. And when my father really took a note, and if he wanted to go out, my dad would drive.
Got it. So right now,
my uncle and whoever.
So your uncle, your mom's brother?
No, my dad's brother Hollis, my aunt Prudy, who lives next door.
Yeah.
They were all river rats and grew up, spent their summers up here.
Yeah.
And much like I did, and when school got out, you moved up here, and when school was ready to go back, you moved home.
Got it. Yeah. And the genetic trait could also just be, maybe it's not a genetic trait. It might just be, well, the river thing is a lot of its environment, nature, not. Yeah.
I think the genetic part started with my dad. I mean, whether it was latent before that and he kind of exploited it, whatever. But
it was
in the late 40s, early 50s, Gerald Reed, at the time where Chalks is now, was Reed's Marina. And Gerald Reed started the Fisher's Landing Racing Club.
Oh, how old was your dad then?
He would have been maybe 13, 14.
That's the peak. That's like the peak year where a latent genetic trait could be activated.
So you had Gerald Reed, and he had sons Donnie and Doug, and daughter Iris, and my father, and a number of other young boys of the era who he kind of took under his wing and said, hey, we're going to, and of course they were a Mercury dealer, and Mercury was very big on outboard racing at the time. So it was just kind of a confluence of events that got my father into it.
Right. It was an environmental, there was a something in the water. Actually, there was Reed on the water, Mercury dealer, bunch of kids the same age, co-located in this spot.
Yep.
And somebody who was excited about them racing. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So your dad started racing in the early 50s?
Early 50s. He got drafted for the Korean War, ended up spending that in Europe. And when he got out, he bought a brand new 1957 Mercury Mark 30H racing engine.
Are we going to see that in a little bit?
We do not have that any longer, unfortunately. We have a couple of twins to it, but not that particular engine.
Yeah.
And he bought a brand new Revo utility race boat, and he would go out and race that around the country. When he bought the engine, it was from Gamble's in Binghamton, New York, and
that's a department store.
It was a department store.
Huh.
And
because I grew up as an air compressor. This is a good thing. We're going to leave this in. When you're in a working shop and you leave the air compressor pressurized, every once in a while it turns on, and you like that. It's like, oh, okay.
Things are working as they should.
Yeah.
But he bought the engine during the off season. They were trying to clear out stock, so he bought the engine. And as you do, you clamp it on the head of your bed because that's a flat surface with a motor board type thing on it. So that's where he stored the engine in his dad's house in Montrose, Pennsylvania.
Clamped to this headboard?
The footboard, I should say.
The footboard, so he went to sleep every night,
with the engine just looking at him. Hadn't been run yet or anything. It was brand new.
Oh my God! And he was just out of the army, so he was still a kid.
Yep.
He got drafted at a young age,
early 20s.
Oh God!
As things happen when you're that age, you have buddies over some night, and you're all hanging out in your room with a 6-pack of beer, and one of the guys says, "Does this thing run?" And as you do, well, sure. Well, let's see it. So they found some gasoline in your bedroom, of course. Always a good idea. And fired it off. Well, it had never been run, so it kind of misfired a little bit, and a little unburnt gas got in the exhaust leg, and it popped out the back and lit the curtains on fire.
I'm laughing because I know that your dad didn't burn up in a horrible fire, so that it all worked out. But
so they mashed it out, but of course there's smoke and noise because it's not a very quiet motor to begin with. And from across the house, they hear my grandfather's heavy footsteps and snarling and growling like, what the blankety blankety boys.
He's like,
Opens my dad's bedroom door, and it's full of smoke and a bunch of sheepish-looking young men. And
just enough empties for that to have seemed like a good idea.
exactly. And I may have done something similar one New Year's Eve many years ago when Will Ramsier and I were living in Cape Vincent, but we won't go into that.
No, not until Will's here to give us a balanced version of it, and especially because Will is a public figure, which is still kind of funny to me.
Nothing untoward.
No, nothing untoward. Thank you. That's one of many, I'm sure, family tales. I was just going to be surprised and delighted that the brand new motor was clamped to the footboard of his bed until he could get it on something. Oh, on the utility that he bought.
Yeah.
A Revo? Revo utility. But having been a 20-year-old with a very underdeveloped prefrontal cortex, I totally get it. There was a winter with my friend Sam. We were roommates at the time where it was really cold outside, and we probably Sam had found an old barbecue grill, and he oh God, Scott's getting something fun down. There's like, this shop is really hard for me because there are visual distractions everywhere, and this hanging from the ceiling are just like glorious examples of just about everything that I think is awesome, like steering wheels and throttles and like crazy like outboard motors that are meant to like run without a right angle turn for the propeller. Like the shaft just goes straight back. Anyway, Sam and I decided we were going to open the window and grill inside, and it was going to be fine because we like talked ourselves into some sort of cross breeze, and that didn't work out very well. We didn't light anything on fire, but we easily could have. So anyway, I get it. What did you just pull off the ceiling?
This is a 1940 Clark Troller.
You're holding it in one hand. It's about 2 feet, maybe 30 inches top to bottom.
Weighs about 14 pounds. It is a completely different take on an outboard motor. It's a two-stroke, but the flywheel is the propeller. The propeller shaft is the crankshaft. The piston goes up and down in that little casting right there. The entire engine part of the motor is underwater, so there's no cooling to worry about. There's an ignition coil under a cover on the top with a mixing valve carburetor.
Where's the spark plug?
Under this little cover right here is a spark plug. It's a battery ignition, so you'd have to carry a 6-volt hotshot battery with you.
So it doesn't generate its own?
Nope.
So you've got ignition as long as you have a charge in the battery?
Exactly. So it doesn't suck water into the exhaust. This little pipe here goes up above the surface and then back down, so the exhaust is underwater, but it doesn't suck in any water into the cylinder. Like the
drain on your sink, but
yeah,
upside down, there's a turn in it so that you have a trap at the top effectively, but it's an air trap.
It has a little lock here, so you lock it up, wrap your rope around the propeller, the little clip there.
Oh.
Pull start it. Once it's running, you pull this pin here, it drops down in the water, and away you go.
This is why this boaty show could be like 7 hours long. But I think what's going to happen is we'll just come back. do the whole Scott Smith series. So Scott, I don't know what prompted you to pull that down off of the hook on the ceiling.
It's
me saying there's lots of distracting things hanging down.
Pretty much,
and it's like one of the coolest ones in here, but probably not the coolest. But it's really cool.
Well, the long shaft engine you were looking at, the direct drive one, we are the third owners. The first owners being the National Geographic Society.
Get out.
That engine has powered an expedition up and down the Amazon River in South America.
I see Liberty.
Yep. Kale Liberty Drive out of Detroit, Michigan.
Whoa. An expedite? Like, what vintage is that? 30s?
1920s.
20s. So that was an early expedition up and down the Amazon.
Exactly. And we bought it from a collector who bought it out of the National Geographic Society.
So by direct drive, like the engine spins the...
It's basically an inboard setup outboard of the boat.
Right. The engine just... the
what I think today they would call a mud motor.
Mud motor, right? Mud skipper motor.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's a two-stroke.
Yep.
How is it cooled?
There is a water pump. You can see the little red hose there that goes down the propeller. There's a pump down in that bulge in front of the propeller that pumps water up to the engine, then it dumps out with the exhaust.
Okay, got it. Yeah. I'm gonna come back to this little troller because you look at it, it looks sort of like just a regular outboard. There's a big bulge at the top, and
That's the gas tank.
but the entire internal combustion engine is at the bottom, where you would typically have the sort of torpedo shape of the.
Kind of like a trolling motor with the electric motor underwater.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a very, very good analogy. That's a super helpful analogy, except it's an internal combustion motor with everything underwater. That's really sweet. What's that? You just like find that?
My father found this back in the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is the long shaft version with the little extension here.
There's a clearly like you can bolt in about a 3-inch extra bit of like structure to get from the gas tank and the clamp at the top to the power head, which is sort of a power foot down below.
The engine.
The engine. Thank you. Yeah. Am I killing you with like, I call things engines, I call things motors, I call things.
Well, and that dates back to actually when Ole Evinrude, he didn't invent the outboard, but kind of perfected it and marketed it successfully.
Yeah.
But he called it the rowboat motor. So typically motors use things you can't see. Engines use things you can see. So an engine would use gasoline, something you can hold. And a motor uses electricity, which you can't hold in your hand.
Oh.
That's how I've always kept them straight.
All right. So you prefer engine?
I use them interchangeably.
Oh, just like me?
In regards to outboards anyway. Because it is an outboard motor, but it is powered by an engine.
And Ole Evinrude is the one who like made that part of his branding.
Kind of, yeah. Well, the Evinrude rowboat motor.
Was motor a more accepted term then?
Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the, like, that was what year was the first?
Ole invented it in the late aughts and started manufacturing them about 1909.
And you put an ostensibly in like some air quotes around invented, because it sounds like it wasn't just him.
There were outboard motors as we know them now, at least in appearance, dating back to the late 1800s.
Okay.
There were some electric models. There were some gasoline. There was some steam.
Yeah.
But prior to Mercury actually made a marketing thing out of this, because old Evinrude's motto was first in outboards for many years. Mercury didn't like that. So they actually found Cameron B. Waterman, who invented the Waterman outboards in the early aughts, and had Mark trumped him out as the true inventor of the outboard motor, as kind of a in-your-face Evinrude.
Just to like poop on Ole and his startup. When did Mercury start?
Carl Kiefer bought the remnants of the Thor outboard motor group in 1939, and he intended to make dairy separators. That was his thing. He was a Midwestern guy.
Like making butter?
Butter and cheese and all that stuff. And he bought a factory. He was just trying to buy a factory just so he could make his thing, and it was full of outboard motors that didn't run.
This is the Thor factory?
Yes. He bought a factory full of outboards that didn't run. Well, needing some capital, he's like, well, I have paperwork here in the offices that I just bought that says they have orders from Montgomery Ward saying we want outboards. So he fixed the issues with the outboards and sent them back to Montgomery Ward, and they sold. They liked them. They worked well. He started getting more orders. He's like, but I want to build my factory, and he keeps getting orders and money keeps pouring in. So.
He wanted to build something. He wanted to build a dairy separator, so an entirely different like type of technology.
Yeah.
He wasn't going to use outboard motors to make butter.
But next thing you know, he's in the outboard business because he's making money at it, and he was first and foremost a businessman.
Yeah.
And turned out he was pretty good at it.
The Thor Motor Company was one of like many competitors to Evinrude.
In the 1930s, as we were kind of creeping out of the Depression, there were a lot of small manufacturers, Thor being one of them. They're to this day, they're not common. They're not rare, but they're not common either. They turn up periodically, the old motors, and they don't run well.
Okay. They were not good.
No, they lacked a true carburetor. They had more of a mixing valve, and it really didn't work. And that was Carl's addition. It's like, well, I'd go to Tillotson Carburetor Company and buy some carburetors and throw them on these and sell them back. And
he was not at all invested in like a particular like line of engineering or idea or anything like that. He just wanted to sell like a nice product that people.
He just wanted to sell the stuff that was on the floor in his way,
so he could get stuff. To making butter.
They left, and like a couple days later, he's getting more orders from Montgomery Ward to like, well, this works, I guess.
Interesting. So Ole and the Evinrude Company, did they blow up pretty early, or did it sort of have to wait until there was more demand?
It kind of, well, prior to the outboard motor, power boating as we know it today was a rich man's game.
Yeah.
And the outboard motor brought it to the masses so that your typical working guy could go fishing on the other side of the lake instead of only where he could row.
Well, you showed me in our sort of orientation walkthrough, and we're going to go back and do another walkthrough, try and catch some video. You showed me a reproduction rowboat that your dad built.
Yep. In 1984, Evinrude Outboards had their 75th anniversary celebration out in, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And at the time, my dad owned what was believed to be the oldest still existent Evinrude. At least two more of lower serial number have come out since, but at that time it was the lowest. And Evinrude tracked my dad down and said, we'd like to have your motor as part of our celebration. So my dad built a boat to go with the motor, and it's a kind of a very traditional tongue and groove bottom cedar planked boat.
A working boat, like somebody would have built for themselves in their backyard, or the guy down the street who knew how to build them.
And that's exactly what we built it in our garage, and we used it for several summers, had it at various boat shows as we kind of went around the country with that.
Yeah. It reminds me of a design that came out, I don't know, probably 20 years ago, called the Lumberyard Skiff, which was same idea. Like you could go to Lowe's or whatever lumberyard and buy, a bunch of stuff and like put it together, and you ended up with a pretty functional, utility fishing boat.
And that's basically what it is. It's very stable, not fast, but you can load a bunch of stuff in it, a bunch of people, a bunch of gear, whatever, and dog can run around the boat from one end to the other and have a ball out on the water.
So the outboard motor that Ole and others started making in the aughts, and then through into the Depression, everybody nobody had discretionary income in the Depression, especially if you were a working person. But then coming out of the Depression, when you had discretionary income, you wanted to get back to having some fun with your family. And now there were outboard motors, and it sounds like some of the economy of scale had come about, so that maybe you could get it at a Gamble's or a Montgomery Ward, so you didn't have to like live someplace where there was like a special place to buy outboards.
Yep.
And then you could put that on the back of the boat you already had that you were already rowing, and then get to a different or a better fishing spot. Maybe take a few more people out with you because you weren't going to be hauling a whole bunch of people along.
Well, and as World War II hit, Mercury, of course, was just having started in 1939. They started getting contracts from the government, being that they built two-strokes. That was really a catalyst for what became Mercury as we know it today.
Those contracts.
The big contracts, and they built drone engines and chainsaws. And so if you ever see a Kiekefer Diston or a Mercury Diston chainsaw, that's Mercury built. Diston built the saw part, Mercury built the engine.
So Diston saw, ironically, Sam Diston, who I barbecued indoors with, his family was Diston saw.
Well, they worked with Mercury to build the chainsaws that cleared paths in the jungles of Southeast Asia and whatever during World War II. But that was where Mercury really developed their two-stroke technology and went from a rickety firm that he started with to really being one of the front runners after the war.
Right.
And during the war was when they designed their first in-house outboard that was not a leftover from Thor.
Got it.
And that was the Mercury KE7, and every engine for the next 60 years basically was built off of that until they came out with the V6s in the 70s, was the first engine that kind of strayed away from that first DNA.
So those contracts gave them money to engineer, money to get a manufacturing economies of scale, build machining, all that kind of stuff, so that they could produce. Yep. And the drone engines, like target drones, that kind of thing?
Target drones for practice. Before they'd send the guys out, they'd either fly them off a ship so they could shoot over the water, or wherever you're doing aircraft type training. Yeah, they would use those drones.
And how do Ole feel about this, do you think?
Well, Ole, he passed away in I think it was the 30s was when Ole Evinrude passed away. But of course, Evinrude had their own, and they were actually building outboards during the war for the military.
Okay, so they had their own contracts, right?
They had, and pretty much if you built stuff, you were under contract for something.
Right, yeah. And I mean, your dad was raising chickens and growing vegetables for a Victory Garden. Everybody was all in.
We have no concept of how involved it was back then.
We really don't.
Like it was every fabric of your life. Went around the war.
Yeah, I mean the only thing that we all shared the pandemic experience and had to respond to that, and there was a lot of pulling together. There was a lot of people weren't getting along. I think that maybe some of that happened during the war as well. But we have no concept of that, of how involved, right?
Yeah.
Every aspect of life, with the mobilization of industry, that sort of thing. So like that was how outboards brought powerboating to the masses in some ways. There was a bit of a transition that happened also with boat builders at the time, because like it was a rich man's game before the mahogany runabout. It was sort of like you could buy a fancy car and you could buy a fancy boat. Power power was more expensive, like getting a motor to put in your boat meant like figuring out either something from scratch or maybe marinizing.
Well, it was a lot of things came together. You had homes were getting electricity. So Joe Schmo down the street, he could get a power saw. He was getting drills. They invented plywood.
Janelle's here. Janelle does not want to be on the podcast. Okay. Do we want to take a break, or do you want to just hang out and we'll edit you out completely? Oh, it's my car at the barn. Yeah. All right. Hi. Bye. Janelle doesn't want to. Janelle is. No, we're gonna edit all that out. Okay. So.
It was the bringing together of all these different facets, and you had the growth of magazines like Popular Mechanics and stuff like that, where you had every month there was maybe a set of plans for a small cruiser or a little runabout or a little punt, and so people were backyard building and with the advent of plywood, which came about because of PT boats in World War II.
Yeah.
You could go down to your local hardware store and buy a couple sheets of 4x8 sheet plywood and build a little boat, paint it up, and you're on the water.
So in the early 50s, when your dad was 13, 14, and Reed down here in Fisher's Landing, was a mercury dealer, all of a sudden there were these resources that were accessible to people who, if they had an interest in time and like could get some money together, they were going to have a whole new like realm of recreation and
yep.
Yeah.
It was everybody who wanted to get into it, and the explosion of the growth in the whole marine industry was just amazing after World War II. Johnson Outboards alone had built their 1 millionth outboard by 1949, and their second million came less than 10 years later. So there were just literally millions of new people getting on the water.
Wow. So then if they were building in the backyard with plywood, that's one thing, but then all of a sudden that becomes an opportunity for people who like maybe built a boat for a friend to get into the boat building business, or also like there was a huge rise in just the consumer economy at that time.
And you had the advent in the early 50s of polyester resins and fiberglass cloth. So it was very slow to come about, the whole bringing on of fiberglass boats. There was a lot of hit and misses, but by the late 50s, early 60s, fiberglass is becoming a viable material as well. And it's lightweight, and with the cars of the day, they're easy to tow. Not everybody had places on the water like we're fortunate enough to, but
right.
You had trailering became a big thing.
And also serial production, because you're building a fiberglass boat in a mold.
Exactly.
So everyone's the same shape.
Yep.
No matter who built it. Yeah. And so trailering became a big thing. And you see like cool old ads, or I see cool old ads of people, towing a boat to the lake and towing a camper to the lake at the same time, that kind of recreation. And this is post-depression, and there'd been in the 50s, there's an investment in the highways, so you could actually get somewhere you could tow your trailer somewhere far away. There were, there've been a ton of national park development, so there are places to go, that kind of thing. The 60s into the 70s. So if sort of racing in the 50s was early enthusiast, building, plywood utilities and putting outboards on the back, and stock racing was a big thing. When did and that seems to have continued. It's like in the automotive world, there's like kart racing. It's how you get into it. You get into racing cars in a kart. So I could imagine you get into racing boats starting in a utility or a...
Well, and you've probably seen the fountain boats that your wife tends to lean towards with the big gnarly engines in them.
Lean is one way to describe it.
But Reggie Fountain, the founder of Fountain Boats, started on his knees in a little plywood boat.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
So you've probably seen, not so much recently, but back in the day, there was the Seabold brand boats.
I don't know it.
There was some tunnel boats and some runabout style boats back in the 80s, maybe early 90s. But Billy Seabold started on his knees in a little plywood runabout.
Yeah.
So a lot of the big name drivers got started in stock outboard, which, as I was just saying, you drive on your knees.
Yeah.
It's kind of akin to maybe a snowmobile in your posture and your body language to control it, that thing.
And it's a stock outboard, so you're not competing on like how much money you can spend on your power.
To a degree, yeah. I mean, you can spend a lot of money on stock outboard for sure.
Okay.
Just because you can't modify the engine doesn't mean you can't, if you have the money, go out and buy 10 pistons, put them all on a scale and see, okay, these 2 pistons weigh the closest. Put those 2 pistons in your engine. Then you do the same with the connecting rods. And you buy 3 or 4 crankshafts and see which one statically balances the best. So there's things within the rules you can do without adding or removing metal or opening up the ports or doing something that is specifically not in the rules.
So you can find tighter tolerances or sort of just in the manufacturing variability
Yep.
of stock parts.
Yep. I mean, if you have 10 pistons, you might have one that's a half gram more or half gram less than this piston. And
So on their knees in utility to, fountain offshore crazy racing. What are the, like, talk us through, because you raced as a kid, right?
I started racing when I was 27.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, my father, after my brothers were born, my mom and dad kind of decided that changing diapers and boat racing were not compatible.
Scott, oldest of four, 23 months older than triplet boys. Wow.
Yeah, so that kind of put the kibosh on the racing.
Your dad made the right decision to to stop racing and traveling around. And
well, it's for my mom's sake.
yeah, well, he made the right decision in that sense. But he was a racer of note. So he started at 13, 14.
He started at 13, 14, got back into it when he got out of the Army in the mid-50s, and raced successfully all over the country from the late 50s right up to about 1972.
Okay.
He held one boat straightaway 1 mile speed record in what's called 36 class, which ran a 35 horsepower West Bend engine on a utility boat. You can see a picture of it on the wall there behind the wire there.
Yep.
And that particular boat is presently in the Antique Boat Museum here in Clayton. But 46 miles an hour with a bone stock 35 horse West Bend, which became Chrysler at some point, about 1966. But in some circles, that record still stands because he was the last one to go over the measured mile. Immediately after that, they changed it to a kilometer. So his standing mile record still stands because it was never beat over the mile.
Right.
The record was raised over the kilometer after that.
Okay, got it. That's cool. And so 46 miles an hour out of 35 horsepower. Earlier when we were in the barns with the boats, the race boats, which we'll again try and do some video of. You shared that one of the attractive and sort of fun things about this is how much speed can you get for how little money out of how sort of small a package. And so you shared that the 80 mile an hour jet ski or the 50 mile an hour jet ski is kind of like a benchmark that you think about.
Well, to get a jet ski to go that fast, you've literally got probably 200 horsepower, maybe more. I'm not super familiar with what they've got for power plants, but it takes a great deal of power for them to do 50, 60, 70 miles an hour. Where my son's little hydroplane with a 15 horse Mercury will just touch 50 miles an hour with a 15 horsepower fishing motor with a specialized gear case, lower unit.
Yeah.
And a little tiny stainless steel prop.
And and somebody who's still immortal.
Mm-hmm.
So as a parent, you put you did it when you got into it when you're 27. Oh, let's come back to that. So your dad got out of it because triplets and a commitment to a stable family and his wife.
And his interest shifted. I mean, it never left boating for sure.
Yeah.
He got out of racing in 72. 73, the boat we're leaning on was in its first boat show in Clayton.
Ah, okay.
So he just shifted from going fast to, okay, I'm a family guy now. Let's have a boat we can all fit in and still enjoy the river and do fun things. And this is by no means the only boat we had growing up, but it was the one that's the one constant.
Yeah.
We've always had this boat.
You were a kid in the back cockpit of this with your brothers, and that was a little vacation for your parents because they were up in the front cockpit.
And at the time, the engine may not have been quiet, and if we were poking and don't touch me,
Yeah.
I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you.
It's it wasn't even happening.
They couldn't hear anything.
They couldn't hear, and they could just look at the river, and that was all behind them, literally.
Yep.
So he got in. His interest shifted, and going to boat shows was a thing.
Yep. And the interest never actually disappeared. In the late 80s, early 90s, the 1950s Mercuries, which had been still raced up to the 80s, are starting to kind of get phased out in favor of engines like this one over here, which is a Japanese engine called a Yamato that took the place of a great many of the Mercuries in some of the middle classes.
As a stock motor.
As a stock motor. And the Evinrudes over here kind of took the place of some of the smaller classes.
Huh.
So those Mercuries start hitting the market as it's not legal, it's not competitive, it's not legal, can't be used in boat racing now.
Because it's it's been so much time racing because of 50s motor that it's no longer really stock.
Well, and no longer could I go down to the marina and buy pistons off the shelf because we're not supporting 30-year-old engines and supplying pistons and rings and seals and crankshafts and all the parts you need to keep an engine in top form.
As a stock form.
Exactly.
Top stock form.
So those engines are now sitting on racks in people's barns and sawhorse queens under the shed and whatever. So they start hitting the vintage market and people are, I'm going to restore this 1957 Revo that I found and I want a vintage engine for it. Well, now they want a place to use it. So my father and a few other people here in Clayton began what became the Antique Raceboat Regatta, first of which was held in 1992 right here in Clayton. It was the first event of its time of its type anywhere.
That's cool.
That was specifically aimed towards vintage racing vessels. So you had everything from the small hydroplanes to we had Miss Budweiser's, that style unlimited hydroplanes here. It was really funny because one year when we had the Raceboat Regatta, there was also a poker run with these guys with their big jazzed up boats and their little chicks in bikinis, and they were not the fastest boats on the river that day by a long shot.
It must have been so satisfying.
When Miss Budweiser was going by Bartlett Point on 180 miles an hour with a
180
with a rooster tail a quarter mile long.
What year was she built?
This was a 70s version with an Allison V12. Just ripping. You think those V8s are up Missy's alley? Try an Allison V12.
She might not survive. She's going to have an aneurysm or something.
But that was a lot of fun. But my father was one of the guys who got that off the ground. And
so how old was he?
He was probably in his 60s at that point.
Okay. So yeah, he's still within the window of the I may be older, but I'm still the same boy.
Well, and we were fortunate enough in the late 80s to find a twin to the boat that's in the boat museum. The exact same, a 1959 Sid Craft built in New Jersey. And we dolled it up just like the boat in the boat museum with the same paint scheme and his numbers. So it was an identical twin.
Yeah.
Rigged it up like he did when he raced it. And we destroyed that boat on the river out here. My brothers and I, tour boat waves, yeah, buddy, we're going. We would launch that poor boat. But we had a lot of fun with it. We participated in the Raceboat Regatta.
Yeah.
Drove the
So
heck
you're in your 20s at this point.
I'm in my 20s, and I've got a few of my own race boats, vintage stuff.
Are you living with Will and Cape Vincent around this time?
Yes. And actually, as Will and I got to know each other and became roommates for a few years, I talked him through rebuilding an Evinrude V4 on his whaler on that bench right there.
Nice.
So if I can teach my attorney how to rebuild an engine, it's really not that difficult. But he actually raced for a couple of years. He's a former Canadian national champion. In the class he ran.
There's a lot I don't know about Will.
Yeah, he ran an engine like this on one of the boats up the barn and won his class. He even still has the plaque.
I'll bet. That's so cool. You just pointed at the Japanese engine.
Yes.
What was it again?
It's a Yamato. It's kind of interesting. They use these engines in parimutuel betting in Japan. If you fly into Tokyo, you'll see a great big marine stadium where they bet on races with a bunch of drivers. It's like samurai. These guys live, breathe, eat boat racing, and they're all sequestered. They're weighed. They're fed. Everything. It's huge. It's $1 billion business.
Still.
Oh yeah.
And they do it in stadiums?
In stadiums, and it's huge money in Japan. And they race them for a season or two, I forget what it is, and then ship the engines back to the factory. They're rebuilt, and then they're exported all over the world for races like this. They're huge in Europe and South America.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
I had never even gotten a glimpse of that. Yeah. That is fascinating.
You want to go down a YouTube rabbit hole?
Sometime. Yeah.
But yeah, and this is one of the engines. This is a early about 84 Yamato model 102. It's about 30 horsepower.
To describe it, there's a really, really beefy lower unit to it.
It is extremely overbuilt. We like them because you really can't kill them.
Yeah. So the 35 horsepower, I would contrast what I see in that lower, like the shaft down to the cavitation plate and the crankcase where the drive shaft makes a right turn to make the propeller spin. It looks like that could be a 60 horsepower.
It's a heavy engine for its size.
And the power head has two pretty big cylinders, sort of they're horizontal facing front to back, and then a small gas tank on top. And it looks like it's all about just
It's all business.
Yeah. All about just spinning that prop, which has a lot of pitch.
That orange thing down there is the only cowling it comes with. There's no shroud. There's no Yamato name emblazoned on it or anything. It's just
doesn't need to be. Is Yamato's the manufacturer of this?
Yes.
Do they have like a lock on that whole racing scene?
They are the sole manufacturer. All the boats are set up evenly. There's no everything is very.
So it's as if if this was F1 racing, as if there were one engine manufacturer, one chassis manufacturer,
one design class.
One design class. They all buy.
Yep.
They all buy from that.
But it's all owned by the stadium. The drivers are all in this sequestered living area. And
wow.
You go out, you draw lots, and you like, oh, this is the boat I'm racing today. It's not my boat. It's owned by the whatever runs the betting thing. So there's no advantage given, although they can fight dirty. If you look on the side here, there's a couple of bolts where there used to be a plastic cover that would cover the spark plugs because the racers would come around with the bow of one boat behind the other and bust your spark plugs while you're out racing.
Whoa.
So they fought dirty.
And that's fine.
Apparently.
And so I could see that creating like a lot of personality around the driver.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's what the sort of like a brand and a marketable celebrity, because that driver comes out, they draw a boat, and then they drive and they race. It's not about, the Miss Budweiser with so-and-so in it. It's about...
It's not like I spent more money on propellers and engine. It's everything is set up equally, same weights, same so there's no handicapping needed.
And our friend Will raced one of these in Canada to a Canadian championship.
High points champion in his class.
High points champion in his class. Good job, Will. I hope you listen to this.
I did the same thing the following year.
You did?
Yeah.
You were a Canadian national champion?
I was. At the time, I was preparing for our wedding, so I didn't have as much money, and joining the Canadian Boating Federation was about half the cost of joining the American Powerboat Association. And being that most of my races were within sight of the border, more or less, they took on each other's governing bodies as far as, like, I'm a member of CBF, I can join an APBA race, and vice versa. If you're an APBA member, you can race in Canada under CBF.
Cool.
So we took advantage of that at the time, and so I was a CBF member and had high points that year, as did Will the previous year. You
were all about using your motors and your boats to live, and that's just another example of it, where it's like, okay, how can I still have as much fun or maybe even more, and but it doesn't cost. But I'm not in a position right now because I'm getting ready for my wedding to like fork over this discretionary income for that. Was it license or membership or whatever?
It's just the governing body that sanctions the races and does all that.
That's awesome. It's funny how boats and boating get like trapped in this, like it has to be just right and perfect and precious. And some of that's because like you're doing it during your vacation and you don't want to have something fussy happen during your vacation. Like you get in that boat and you've got a week to enjoy it with your family. The thing better run, and you don't want to have to futz around with it. But when you spend as much time on the water, next to the water, live this life, like then it's a little more possible to do that. And I'll be frank, like one of the reasons we have a lot of boats in my family is because one is always broken.
I can commiserate.
So it's like I could have like one really, really nice expensive boat, or I could have 4 beaters. Hey, Janelle, we're currently here rationalizing our choices. Don't worry, you won't appear on the podcast unless you want to. You want to say hi? Nope. All right. You're welcome to hang out. We won't be distracted. Cool. So the racing that you started doing was rooted in some of that classic race boat racing.
That's what got most of the guys in our club now started in the vintage stuff.
Okay.
Because I bought a boat from David K. Smith from Grindstone Island that his son ran, and I built a 1952 Mercury KG7H to run on it just as a play motor out here on the river, and had a blast with it. That was the one that kind of turned my dad back on to the Mercuries, because that was my teenage rebellion, was getting into Mercuries, because he grew to detest them after he raced them. But I got them to run pretty well, and he had fun driving it, and that was kind of one of the catalysts for his interest in getting back into the vintage stuff to start what became the Raceboat Regatta. So as that vintage stuff, we played with it, we had fun with it, but Doug Reed, the son of Gerald Reed, who started the club, kind of told us, like, if you guys are serious, I will front the money to bring an actual race back to the region. Because at the time, there were no local boat races.
No, like sanctioned, homologated, I don't know what the right words are. But
I think there was one inboard race over in Brockville, Ontario, but no stock outboard stuff within a day's drive.
Okay.
You'd have to get to New England or New Jersey to find boat races in that era. And so
90s.
Yep. Doug Reed, he was freshly retired from Reeson Refuse, which was bought up by Waste Management. He was freshly retired. He had money to burn. He's like, I will pay your...
He had Waste Management money. There's a lot of money.
I will pay your sanction fees and insurances and everything else you need if you guys want to start racing for real. I mean, so...
He wasn't looking for some people to sort of show up hungover, hacking at it, whatever.
He's like, if you guys want to stop messing around with the vintage stuff and get your Yamatos and your Evinrude Days and race modern stuff...
Yeah.
I'll cover the racing part and get you started. And after that, you're on your own. But that first year, I'll help out and cover some of these costs.
Yeah.
So his sons, Philip and Scott, they were kind of the first to jump on that bandwagon. This is about 94 or 5. They started getting newer stuff. I wasn't financially ready yet. I bought my first real modern race boat in 1997.
So you were still getting as much as you could out of vintage. And what...
I was kind of doing the messing about and boat thing at that time.
Yeah,
and just
okay.
playing with my vintage stuff.
Yeah.
And Will Ramsey and I was living with him over on Grindstone. We had 2 evenly matched hydroplanes with Mercury 25 SSs on them that was the newest motor I owned at the time from 1981. I had a matched set of boats and motors, and we would run up and down Eel Bay side by side at 60 miles an hour.
Jesus, that's beautiful. Eel Bay is a big, wide, kind of even depth bay at the upriver head of Wellesley Island. And on evenings and sort of like north wind days, it can be, I don't know, like a couple square miles of flat water.
Yeah. And he was private practice, just getting started. I was working in newspapers, which at the time were still pretty thriving. And
you're a graphic designer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we were pretty busy. We'd come home from work. It'd be nice out. And we'd be like, I'm not quite ready to crack open a beer. You want to go for a blast? So we'd gas up the boats and just run down the bay at wide open throttle. And occasionally we'd throw a couple of milk jugs on weights in the middle of the bay and use them as turn buoys and just kind of go at it for a few laps.
And you would leave your cares behind, and you were of an age that you didn't have any cares in the first place. So that sounds like
And we were able
sublime.
to walk afterwards because it can be hard on the knees.
Yeah. I'm sitting here thinking I kind of want to get into this racing thing, but I'm also thinking, all right, like what's it going to take in terms of yoga and anti-inflammatories and maybe some like core strengthening
Lots of acetaminophen and aspirin.
and bubble wrap.
And after the races on a Saturday night, there might be some beer involved.
Yeah. So, okay. So that you were in the messing about with Will kind of thing, but Mr. Reed said, I'll front basically a team.
Well, he would do the back door, the backside stuff that you'd need to host an event.
Oh, host an event. Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
And because if we presently have an event that our club does every year in Redwood, New York on Crystal Lake.
Okay.
And we are presently involved in the behind-the-scenes stuff that it takes to put on an event like this, where there's sanction fees and insurance and getting porta potties lined up and a food truck and all these things that you have to have an event where a few hundred people are going to show up.
Right.
And Doug said, I will help out with the sanction fees and the insurance and the stuff that like that. You guys are on your own for the rest, but this is the seed money. Do with it what you will.
Yeah.
So we kind of ran with that. It took us a few years to figure things out. And in 1997, we had our first Crystal Lake Regatta, which we drew well over 100 boats to. Wow.
That sounds like a lot to me.
It was for the event, and it has been running, except for a COVID year, it's been running ever since.
When is it?
It's the third weekend in September, 2 weeks after Labor Day.
Okay.
This year, I think it's the 14th and 15th of September is the Crystal Lake Regatta.
Damn it. I'm going to be in San Francisco that weekend. I need to plan this better.
We do have another event that at present is kind of floating around depending on other things in Fulton, New York. And this year it was Father's Day weekend. Last year it was middle of August. And in 2 years, I think there's a movement afoot to bring the Nationals to Fulton, New York. It's a beautiful site.
The Nationals of what class?
Of stock outboard.
Okay.
It might even be a stock and mod being modified outboard, where there are some modifications you can make to your boat or to your motor.
Yeah. But that's not just one, like, oh, it's 100 boats with 15 horsepower on it. It could be
everything from the 15 horsepower with a restrictor, which is what they use in the junior class. That's what my son started at age 9.
Yeah.
As you age out of the junior class, you pull out the restrictor plate, bumps the horsepower up, bumps the speed up, and now you've kind of taking the training wheels off, I guess you could say.
A restrictor plate restricts the amount of fuel and air that can go into the
Correct.
engine. It's in between the carburetor and the engine.
Yeah. The junior class is kind of neat because there's no propeller testing, buying involved. The propellers are provided by the American Powerboat Association, and you draw in lot. You leave your membership card, you take a propeller, that's the prop you use, and then it goes back to the caretaker of the prop. So it kind of evens the playing field.
Oh, because we haven't talked about props in this. That's where there's a lot
There is a lot.
of stock options.
Yes.
Okay. So then you don't have to like buy a whole bunch of props, figure out which one works, blah blah blah.
For the junior.
For the
class.
junior for the kids. So that's great. You can get a 9-year-old into this for a stock 15 horse outboard 2-stroke, right?
Yep.
Which at this point there are hopefully still a lot around that you can get.
Well, the biggest issue right now, the way it's set up now, is the lower units are not being made anymore.
Oh.
So they're very dear right now, and you can spend a great deal of money on a lower unit for the racing motor. There is a movement afoot to introduce the Tohatsu 4-stroke 20 horse and restrictors and other things to make it the new engine of choice in these classes. And the plan is to leave the engine bone stock as bought from the factory with no racing lower unit involved, which simplifies things. It means I can go down. The Tohatsu is also marketed by Mercury, same engine with a Mercury decal.
Yeah.
So that means I can go down to Chalks, wherever they sell Mercuries, and buy the motor for a few $1,000s and go racing. I'm not trying to, and this engine,
The Yamato.
very hard to find.
Yeah.
The present supply is hit and miss. Parts for older ones, I can't go down to your local Yamato dealer and buy parts.
You're cruising eBay or something.
Cruising
like that.
eBay. I did find out through fortuitous circumstances that the points in this engine, it has a points magneto, are the same ones used in a Kawasaki 1000 in the early 80s, which means, I can find the points on eBay. If I tried to find Yamato points, non-existent.
The points are what transmit the ignition electricity to the spark plug at the right time.
Correct.
Right. They spin around in a distributor. Does this have a distributor? You call it a magneto, or is it basically the same
Well,
thing?
being a 2-cylinder, there's no distributor per se.
Oh, okay.
The flywheel moves around the coils, and there's a cam on the crankshaft that opens and closes the point.
Okay.
Actually, I hit that.
So
motor
it does
right there.
have a camshaft, but like not the same kind of camshaft that a 4-stroke has.
Correct. It's just a little lobe on the crankshaft.
Just for ignition, not for
just opens and closes.
not for intake exhaust.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Actually, I have that engine over there. I have the magneto apart on. So that was my project this morning at 6 a.m.
Until I showed up and we went meta. So that issue with the Evinrude lower units, it sounds like it's kind of similar to what happened when all the 50s Mercuries just got like to the point where you couldn't get parts anymore.
Evinrude stopped making those lower units back in the early 90s.
Yeah.
A company called, was it Sidewinder, took up the castings and whatnot, and they were able to make prop shafts and gears and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. The gentleman who ran Sidewinder passed away a couple years ago, and now nobody's making anything for them at the present. They're trying to find somebody to take that on, but it's not cheap to manufacture hardened steel components to fine tolerances. So and it's not a moneymaker. No.
I wonder if just like the rise and sort of commoditization of CNC machining to a point could end up with like, you could machine to order a one-off.
It could come to that.
Yeah.
And what it's going to take is a confluence of people with the knowledge, the money, and the desire to make it happen.
Right.
And right now they're struggling to make that happen.
I mean, somebody's ultimately going to have to come up with all of the files to instruct the machine how to do it. And it's probably never going to be just throw the billet in the program.
There's a gentleman out west named Bass who was making lower units for the larger classes, 50, 60 horsepower style. And it's a great big heavy duty lower unit. It works well. And a lot of guys use it, but the small stuff, nobody's making anything right now.
Yeah. And also like machining something out of billet as a one-off. Time on those machines is not cheap, and neither are the materials going in. So anyway, okay. The Crystal Lake Regatta. So the stock outboard nationals could come to Fulton Lake.
Yeah, the Lake Neonawana in Fulton, New York.
Lake Neonawana in Fulton, New York, and the Crystal Lake Regatta is that what it's known as? What's the
Crystal Lake? And this will be, I think.
Scott's looking at his shirt. It says 21st annual, and I'm looking for a date. I don't see it.
I think it's 26th or 27th annual.
Yeah, I love that Redwood has the Crystal Lake and the dirt the dirt track too. Redwood, there's a lot of racing going on in Redwood.
Yeah.
Is there any crossover? Do like the sprint car guys get into the boats or vice versa?
Well, a number of years ago,
or gals?
a buddy of mine named Mike he and his dad were big into motocross and bikes and all that. And I took Mike out for a ride in our twin to my dad's Comet race boat. And we got back from that because it was a big boat and you could take passengers in. We got back. He was like, Dad, we got to get one of these. And that was early 90s. And then he bought a motor from Doug Reed down the road and a derelict hull out from behind Rodney Watterson's shop here in the Landing. Rebuilt it. He called it the Demon. It was a little bright red needle of a boat. And he joined the fray. I had never raced before and there was no racing in his family, but he joined the Fisher's Landing fray of the Reeds and my family. And bombing around the river, making a lot of noise and getting spark plugs thrown at us or whatever.
Wait, that's a story.
But he and his dad are very mechanically inclined.
Right.
And his dad worked for GM in Rochester, and Mike is a machinist, and they just have all sorts of knowledge and preciseness of what they're doing. So as Mike got into it, he's like, I'm not just going to go out and run. I'm going to go out and run to win. And he was one of the guys who would buy a bunch of pistons and buy a bunch of rods and find out what are the tolerances in the rule book that must be met, and then take it right to the limit. He had the time and the knowledge and the means to do all that.
Yeah.
And so that one ride and one boat in our late teens, early 20s resulted in multiple national championships and high points and whatnot for him. And by the early 2000s, and he eventually hit a point where like, well, I've done pretty much I can with this. So now he's into snowmobiles.
Oh, okay.
So, and four-wheelers. So
yeah, and snowmobiles still have two-stroke engines in them, so they still have that power to weight excitement. Cool. The Crystal Lake Regatta. How many types of boat is it? Is it a class? Or a type?
There are many classes divided by engine size, displacement, which there are some overlap, like I was saying, with restrictor plates and whatnot. So you can run an engine in a smaller class with a restrictor just to help fill out the field, that kind of thing. We might run as many as a dozen classes, maybe a little bit more. And it's divided up into what they call runabouts and hydroplanes. A hydroplane being of the 3-point variety with a stepped hull. 3
points meaning there's about 3 points that make contact with the water?
And typically. But once you're underway, it's usually just the one at the back, where maybe it might even be the lower unit of the motor if the boat's really flying.
And then the rest of it is like flying is the operative word there.
Yeah,
right?
it's an airfoil.
It has lift.
Yep,
the
it's
shape.
literally flying.
Okay. Oh God. So that
would be the hydroplanes.
Yep.
And there's runabouts, which are a single planing surface. They're the ones with the pointy bow.
Yeah. Those look hectic.
They're. I like to say a hydroplane is a runabout with training wheels. That's one of those things that after you've had a couple of beers and you're in the pits and the hydro drivers and the runabout drivers are egging each other on.
Right.
I've driven both. I enjoy both. The sense of speed is much better in a hydroplane. They're typically faster, but
because they have some stability to them.
There's less body English involved in driving it. A runabout.
Body English meaning you're not moving as much.
No, it's a lot more point and shoot.
Okay.
Squeeze the throttle and go.
When to squeeze the throttle, right?
There's more to it than that, obviously. It's not that easy, but for the sake of the discussion, it's easier to drive a hydroplane. A runabout takes a lot more body English. You're using your weight to get the boat to corner. As I was telling you earlier, it's a lot like rolling a water ski into the corner. You're trying to get that edge to really bite to turn the boat and carve a turn.
And the weight distribution and when you actually shift your weight, the weight distribution front to back, when you actually shift your weight is what's going to plant that edge and allow you to actually make that tight radius turn.
And not slide into the guy next.
Not slide into or roll and tumble and all of that kind of thing.
Well, I've done them all.
Well, and what kind of safety equipment do you wear when you're in? Do you wear different safety equipment in different boats or the same?
In stock outboard, everybody wears primarily the same thing. You're wearing head to toe a Kevlar suit, Kevlar fabric. We call it a cut suit.
Just cut right to the chase. Like, why are you wearing that suit? It's a cut suit.
Well,
because
and those tiny little stainless steel props are very thin and have a very sharp edge.
And how fast are they spinning?
Several thousand RPM.
Yeah, so you're inches away from multiple like large blender wheels.
Yeah. And you wear a helmet and obviously wear a life jacket, and they call it's a racing life jacket. It's made to float you face up in case you end up in the water unconscious, which doesn't happen very often, but has been known to happen.
Yeah.
And the life jacket has something what they call flak. That's embedded inside it as well. It's an impact resistant because it's not just propellers. You could be flying across the water until you come to a stop and a boat hits you. You got to have something that kind of distributes that force so you aren't just crushed.
Wow. Okay. And the Kevlar suit, it didn't used to be a full suit, right? Wasn't it?
Well, back in my dad's, and if you look at the picture there, my dad's wearing a T-shirt and jeans.
Yeah, so it didn't used to be a suit at all.
No, there was nothing. And then in the 80s, as more litigious
You got it.
society and lawsuits started piling up and people are injured or whatever, or insurance claims, whatever it came. It's like, well, we can prevent some of these injuries by introducing, and eventually was mandated that you had to wear these suits.
Mm-hmm. And do you wear anything like to stabilize your neck?
The life jacket does have a collar.
Okay.
That will, with the helmet on, does kind of keep your head from bouncing around too.
So if you go ass over tea kettle across the water, which, I mean, I've done water skiing and tubing, much less like flying out of a race boat, that can help keep your neck from bending too far one way or the other or too quickly.
Yeah, and I've rolled the boat, I've spun out, and I've blown it over. So I've done pretty much the three things you can do. Quick story. In Sydenham, Ontario, the year I did not win the Canadian National when Will did, part of it was because I didn't finish one heat because I was swimming.
How did you end up swimming?
Coming up for the start, I was kind of in the middle of the pack and got hosed by the guy ahead of me. His rooster tail, the prop wash, hit me in the face.
Yeah.
This is before I learned about Rain-X.
Rain-X meaning the stuff you put on the glass.
Beads the water off.
Beads the water without having to use your windshield wipers.
So
in the car.
I'm blind. All I see is blurry movement. And as the water starts, the wind blowing the water off my visor, I can kind of see an orange and a yellow shape down. And so I was like, okay, there's a turn buoy. So I'm coming up to the start. Can't see the clock. So I'm mid-pack. So I'm like, okay, I'm not in the lead. I'm not going to jump the gun. Well, as more water comes off my visor, I see that that's not a turn buoy. That's a boat off course, a spectator boat that I'm aiming towards. My turn buoy is over to my right. At speed, these boats do not like to turn right.
Oh, because it's a oval where you're turning left the whole time.
All your fin, your prop torque, all that wants you to turn left. So I, a little too quickly, turned right to get back, and the boat just went whoop.
Up in the air?
Up in the air, nose to the sky. It's spinning on the engine. It spit me out on the first revolution, then spun a couple more times from what I'm told. I don't remember any of this. All I saw were bubbles. And the boat landed upside down. In doing so, it hydraulicked. As it landed, the cockpit hit the water, and all the air in the cockpit got compressed and blew the deck off for about a 2-foot seam where the deck meets the side, and started to sink a little bit. It caught enough water or enough air in the inside, it didn't sink, but it went underwater enough to make me nervous. Towboat came over, we towed it back to shore. I get on shore. 10 guys I had just been racing with I'm getting checked out by the EMTs to make sure I'm not injured, which I wasn't. I'm walking back to the boat. The spark plugs are out. They're blowing water out of my cylinder. The boat's empty of water. My wife has a duct tape bandage over the split in the deck. Second heat, my engine's running. I made it out for the second heat. I never touched a wrench.
Those people took care of you.
The guys I was just racing with are getting my boat going.
That's cool.
That's what I love about this sport. It is, you're competitive on the course, but when you're off the course, I can't race against you if you're not on the water.
And I really want to race against you. I really want to beat you. But for that to happen, we're going to have to all work together.
My wife had never seen me wreck.
Oh, Lord.
She was very nervous.
I could imagine.
She was pretty sure that was my boat. It was several hundred yards away. She's like, I think I saw yellow. And then as the boats came around the turn, she's like, I don't see Scott. I don't see Scott. She was very nervous. So
was this at Crystal Lake?
No, this was Sydenham, Ontario.
Okay, you mentioned that. Yep.
North of Kingston.
Yeah, right. The year you didn't win the Canadian Championship.
Yep. So
and these are Canadians fixing your boat. You're from.
Actually, it was everybody.
Everybody.
The guys from the landing, and it was a local race for us. It was only 45 minutes away.
Yeah.
So we all went. So I'm on the beach. I'm getting dried out. The boat's dried out, patched up. I'm ready to go. After all said and done, we're back on the beach. Janelle's still shaking. It's like, you're okay. You're sure? I'm like, I'm fine. I'm fine. Trust me. My buddy Mike's sister comes over, puts her arm around Janelle. She's like, I've seen my dad wreck. I've seen my brother wreck. He's fine. You're fine. Go on about your business. My buddy Mike comes over, and excuse my French, he goes, I was right behind you when you were over, man. That was fucking beautiful.
He was so happy. You gave him a gift.
He was the one that described what the boat did after it spit me out. He was like, it went up, it was pirouetting on the engine, and it went wham. He was like, it was fucking awesome.
I love it. I think that scene and the people helping each other out like that's got to be as compelling as any other aspect of it, that community.
And it's the entire sport is like that.
Mm-hmm.
In every boat race you go to, if I'm not racing, I'm standing next to somebody else. These engines, there's no recoil on it, so the driver can't start the motor.
Yeah.
So I'm wrapping a rope with a knot in it.
This is the Yamato, which is like basically meant to just fly and that's it.
Yep.
It's not meant to idle. It's not meant to do anything.
The extra 5 pounds of a recoil, not there because it's a complexity that can break.
Mm-hmm.
Not worried about it. So that guy, he's sitting, he's got his throttle held, he's got the steering wheel, he's ready to go, and he nods his head. I'm the one pulling the rope for him.
That's cool.
And then when he comes back, I give him back the rope and I go on and help somebody else.
That's really special. And so every September, this Crystal Lake Regatta has that scene going on, and it's
Yep.
close to the Thousand Islands. Huh.
It's about maybe 25 minutes from here.
Yeah, Redwood. Wow. I want to come back around to some of the manufacturer stuff because it sounds like Mercury Racing's a big deal,
Yes.
but they're not making, well, nobody's making two strokes anymore. It may be that Tohatsu, which shares engineering and some manufacturing.
And that's a
Mercury.
4-stroke, 24.
Four-stroke, right,
Yeah.
right. Just to keep the small class race going, right? You could still have a 9-year-old with a restrictor plate.
Yep. And this is somebody on their own. I just bought this engine. I have a little money. I'm going to experiment with it.
Yeah.
And see if it's a viable engine for the class. And what they're trying to find propellers that work because there's a rev limiter in the brain of the engine so you can't just let it scream.
Mm-hmm.
It hits that rev limiter and cuts off the ignition. So you're trying to maximize your power output before you get the engine RPM too high.
So propping becomes a big deal.
Yeah, there's a guy named Ron Hill who's a racing prop maker who's kind of helping with the project and supplying propellers for experimentation. And so there's a group of people who are trying to see if this is viable going forward to help save the sport.
There's kind of like I'm sure you're familiar with the cocktail class.
Mm-hmm.
So it was I think it was in Maryland. There were a group
a yacht club or something.
Yacht club. Yeah, they wanted to do something fun and started a class of, would you call those utilities or runabouts? Or
They're very, some of the things there are people with hydroplanes, but mostly utilities because they use them on public waterways with a lot of boat shop and this stuff. And a hydroplane really does not like boat shop. A runabout is much able to negotiate boat wakes and jet skis, wakes, that sort of thing.
But there's a business called, I think it's Chesapeake Light Craft.
Mm-hmm.
They do computer numerically controlled boat kit manufacturing, and they started with kayaks. But I think they either make or were supportive of creating the plywood pieces that you could then build into one of these cocktail class racers.
I think they offer kits.
Yeah,
and
kit,
kind of
right.
encourage that backyard builder mentality as well.
Yeah. And so this was like an interesting, I want to say it probably happened, early 2000s, maybe a little bit later, but the whole deal with that is it had to be a 9.9 outboard motor stock. But those are like harder and harder to find. I looked into actually building one and racing because we have a 9.9 Tohatsu, but converting it into a remote throttle from the tiller twist grip was like when I had younger kids and it was like too much to do at the time. But there's some interest from people in like this kind of really accessible boat racing.
Yeah.
My sense of it, I have no firsthand knowledge, is that kind of bootstrapped on its own at this yacht club with some friends who they were just titrated enough with the beer to follow through on it.
It'd be a good idea.
What if we, and so keeping it going, there's some energy around that. And I think I'm really fired up to go to the Crystal Lake Regatta, this Fulton, New York.
The Fulton Regatta, I don't know when it's scheduled for next year, but I think in 2 years, I'm not sure it's been accepted yet, but we put in a bid for the Nationals in 2026.
Okay. Anybody out there who's involved in that, making that decision, this is, you make the right decision.
They've held it at Whitney Point, New York a few times.
Okay. That's not too far away.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, and it sounds like it could pull geographically the sort of.
Yeah, it bounces. They try to do like East Coast, Midwest, West Coast, and then cycle through so that people in different regions can make the Nationals. Obviously, we're not going to draw many Nationals drivers from California or Washington State.
Right.
And when I think this year it was in Washington State, there weren't many New York drivers who made the trip out to Washington State.
Yeah.
So they try to move it around so everybody gets a chance to make the Nationals.
What I'm interested in is participating in some way. And so keeping it, like for me, just like I don't need to race a boat, but I'd love to go pull start motors,
It's
that kind of thing.
It's very doable because of insurance reasons. And you now actually have to do a day membership to APBA.
Sure.
It's not super expensive to get into the pit, the active pit area.
Yeah.
So if anybody is coming to Crystal Lake this year, the spectator area is sequestered from the active pit area without having to join APBA.
It sounds like there are ways that if you are interested and knowledgeable and can be safe, you could join APBA and help out in some way, shape, or form.
Yep. It usually helps to, and when Janelle came to her first boat race, my dad was there with her, and she's like, I've never been, what do I do? My dad's like, sit with me for a while and just watch.
Right.
And see what the flow is, see what needs to be done. You'll find your spot. Don't make it happen. Just kind of let it happen organically.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what she did. And when I was racing actively, by that I mean a half dozen races a year, we became one of the favorite people to pit next to because of my wife, who was very helpful with anybody near us in the pits as far as lifting a boat, rolling a boat cart, getting the gas, getting the driver. Cause when you come back from the racing, I can't talk, my mouth is dry.
Yeah.
So she'd be there with a water bottle.
All the adrenaline and then the air blowing in and out of your mouth.
Exactly. So she kind of won over a lot of other racers as this new girl who kind of figured things out quickly.
Yeah.
And most guys' wives were happy to sit on the beach and just watch, and she wanted to be part of it.
That's Janelle.
Yeah.
She's all in, whatever it is.
So I was very fortunate.
You are. Yeah. She's a wonderful woman and really, like, and every time I've met her, spent time with her, she's all into whatever's going on. It's cool.
Yeah.
I had one more question. Oh, I had an analogy. So I coach rowing. I was a rower.
Mm-hmm.
The regatta scene is now my favorite part of that because everybody's there, everybody's helping out, and everybody, like, you're to some extent like sharing parts with competitors on the next trailer
you
over.
talk about it on the podcast. I mean, I see a lot of crossover, a lot of the same kind of family involved.
Yeah. And also for kids, like, okay, this is an opportunity for you to go out and have, like, you're taking responsibility for every aspect of what's going on, at least at a minimum from like when you push off to when you return, and then, as much as possible, what's going on land as well. Yeah.
Well, my now 15-year-old, when he started at 9, that was when I more or less got out. I tried racing that year. The engine didn't run well at the time, so I just kind of shelved it and became a racer.
You just pointed at the Yamato again. Is that what you're using now?
Yeah, I had rebuilt the engine and neglected a couple of things. That was a learning process for me. I'd never rebuilt this particular motor before, and I didn't have everything 100%.
Yeah.
So that year I was also trying to help Liam get going, which was part of it because I was getting a new boat together, an engine, and couldn't focus on one thing. So I kind of set my racing aside for a few years while Liam was kind of coming up through and became a racing dad. And now that he's kind of independent on that, he can rig his own engine, get the prop on there. He can do that all by himself. This year I'm going to get back into it myself with my boat.
Yeah.
And have a go at it and see if my knees can handle it at 55 as they did when I was 25.
That's your age, not necessarily the speed, right?
Yes. Well, the boat will do a little over 60.
Okay.
In a 11.5-foot boat.
God bless you. And you're tall. You're 6'4"?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, you're taller than I am. I've shrunk. So knees, hunched, dead man throttle. So we didn't talk about the dead man throttle. So it looks like the handle of a caulking gun that you might use to like run a bead of caulk or around your window or whatever. So there's a fixed part and a squeezy part, and you squeeze the part that gets things going. Yeah. Oh, Scott's grabbing something. And so when you let go of the throttle, Scott shared earlier, that actually closes a butterfly valve. Okay, I'm holding one in my hand. So the front of it has grippy things for your fingers, and then the back of it is the squeezy part that comes forward. And like my hand's not small, and so when I squeeze, that actually at first just opens the butterfly, the entirely closed butterfly valve that will keep the engine from running. Like no fuel or air can get in, or no air can get in. And then at some point, like I can imagine, the fuel starts, and then I can squeeze it all the way tight, and I'm at full throttle.
Correct.
So you're crouched on your knees. You've got your hand.
This, of course, is mounted to the side of the boat. It's not free floating.
Right.
So.
Right. Not like Steph's throttle. Steph needs a dead man throttle in the seaway.
So and you're not necessarily gripping on it. When you're first starting it, you can actually push it from the back. So you're not necessarily closing your hand on it until it gets within comfortable reach. So
okay, got it.
You can sit there and kind of just push and then grip as you're going.
Right.
It's also part of what's keeping you in the boat too, as you're bouncing around out there.
You're holding on to this.
You've got a death grip on it to keep yourself from
The death grip on the dead man throttle.
Yes.
All sorts of really terms that Janelle probably doesn't enjoy
very
hearing.
dark.
And if I let go of this, it springs all the way open, which closes the butterfly valve, cuts off the air out of the engine.
And that's typically, as you're coming back into the pits after a heat, that's what you'll do. You'll either pull your kill switch or you'll
Let go of that.
let go of the throttle as you don't want to run anybody over, so you just kind of
Coast in.
coast into your pit crew.
Okay. And then your other hand's on the wheel,
Yep.
and that's holding you in the boat.
Yep. Between the steering wheel and the throttle, that's what's keeping you from going for a swim.
You're going to be back out there on your knees again.
I am.
Good for you. I can't wait to hear how
Well,
it goes.
Last in Fulton, Liam was out there. He was running what's called a runabout with a Mercury 15 horse, and he had bumped up a class because there were no other AX runabout or AX hydroplane, excuse me, which is the class that the Mercury runs in, the Mercury 15.
Yeah.
And it's a class open to anyone from the age of, I think, 12 to whatever. So he was racing against a woman named Barb who was in her 60s. So
Cool.
he's 15, she's in her 60s, and he's racing with her.
So Walker and I could go racing.
You could.
Against each other.
You could.
Huh.
And Liam and I, going forward, or at least for the short term anyway, are probably going to be sharing a boat and motor where he's running what's called 20 hydro, which was originally made for 20 cubic inch engines. And I will be running C hydro, which is for closer to 30 cubic inches. But because of the lack of engines, they've now made the C engine legal in 20 with a restrictor plate.
Got it.
So we can run the same boat with two different drivers in different classes.
Cool.
So
One trailer, one boat,
trailer. Yep.
twice the fun.
Yep.
And you're not necessarily competing against each other in that sense, but I imagine
Not yet.
there's
it may
time.
happen someday.
Yeah, but like how much? It's all head to head, side by side.
Mm-hmm.
Are you timed at all, or
They do time it because to conduct a race is actually made up of 2 heats.
yeah?
You
Okay,
go out, you hit your starting gun, 3 laps. That finishes that race. You do it again half hour later.
same racers.
Same racers, same class.
So they even out some of the variability that can happen.
Yep.
Maybe
if
with
you
weather,
get
with whatever.
a good start. It's a clock start, so you're trying to hit the start finish line at 0 on this great big clock.
Yeah.
And so you can, if you're early, you jump the gun. If you're late, you're kind of in the rear with the gear. So
That's how sailing races start. So
Exactly.
there's a countdown to a start time, a moment in time when everybody is allowed to cross the line.
So over 2 heats, you get a certain number of points per finish in each heat. And then the winner is determined by your total number of points from the 2 heats. If there's a tie, like say your first place, second heat, or first place, first heat, second place, second heat, and the other guy that won the second heat was second place in the first heat, you've got the same number of points. Then they would go back to the clock and see what your time was, and you'd win on time.
Similar to ski racing. So you race twice in a day, and you take your. It's all time based. It's not even place based, but you take your fastest time or your average time out of that. That's cool. I think that we've covered a lot of ground here, and we're going to go do a little bit of a video walkthrough.
Sounds good.
So is there anything else you want to share with everybody? I can't thank you enough for spending the morning with me.
No problem.
Yeah, it's really enjoyable. And I think that we'll do this again if you're up for it.
There's certainly more here to talk about.
Oh my God, you don't even know people. It's like on and on. A life, like many lives well lived, having as much fun as possible in boats with motors on the water. It's just brilliant. All right, we're out.
Yo ho ho, that's it for the boating show. Pack the cooler, grab the lines, let's go, go, go. Yo ho 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 ho.
That's it for the Bodie Show. Thanks so much, Scott.